4:01, calling our Thursday, August 29, 2024 regular meeting to order. Starting early for a study session. Looking for a motion. Oh, we have Dan Glowitz is absent today, and we have Maggie Tucker on Google Meet, and then we've got three others present in person, as well as our one official sworn in student rep, and then our other soon to be sworn in student rep. So we'll run that just like last time. Lucy will be sworn in at our next meeting. So I'm looking for a motion to establish the agenda. So second. Any discussion? All in favor, indicate by saying aye. Student? Aye. And board? Aye. That is 1040. The agenda is established, and moving right along to superintendent report.
No, we'll go right into
our study session. I don't know what I'm looking at. Last meeting. Yeah, let's move on to this agenda. There we go.
All right. A year ago, we were talking about the next phase in our long-range facility plan, and I went back to last year's agenda just to kind of see where we were. And at that point, we were talking about, we were coming to you looking for direction. Is where we left off at the long-range facility group where you wanted us to continue to go, which was engagement. And that's what we spent last fall doing. And we come to you a year later. And your direction when you left off in the summer was, we have architects, we've been engaging community about our schools, and you sent off our team, mainly our architects, Brandy, Tony, and others, to bring you back, the initial thinking around what these concepts and designs might look like, and then costs that are associated with them, keeping in mind that it's really hard to compare the two projects because of the way that they're going. But with that, I'm going to not say any more and turn it right over to Brandon.
Thanks, Phil. There we go. Well, it's been a very busy summer, and both teams here have done a huge amount of work, so we're excited to share with you. But I thought it would be helpful maybe to just sort of start the meeting with a couple of things. One, just reiterating what Dr. Rundle had said, our last real update to you about the long-range facilities plan was in the direction we received at that time was to continue forward on the path we were and doing the concept design work for the middle school, high school, the must-do projects like safety and ADA. I think what we want to come out of this meeting today with is a clear direction that you're ready for us to move to the next stage. So things I want to cover briefly. I want to just refresh your memory about the schedule. Talk about what that means for potential board schedule if you're still thinking about an April 2025 bond. I also want to introduce two topics to you. One is kind of a bond cost example of how we might build a bond, and lots to come on that, but particularly around selection and escalation, and then give you an update on OSPI funding for the projects. And then I'll turn it over to followed by Nate. You still working on it?
Yes, I think it's working.
Okay. So this is where we are, the circled portion. This summer, we've really spent working on the design and cost modeling for the projects. And next phase would be refinement of those costs that you're going to see today. And particularly at the high school, the prioritization of that long list of projects, as well as our community outreach. And by that, I mean, at both sites, we would be talking to staff and students and parents. And then at the middle school specifically, we would be reaching out to the Lakes HOA group to ensure that they are aware of kind of the process we're going through. And then finalization of that and the preparation for the bond.
So what that means for the board. Are you just gonna move it when I push it? And then you caught my drift, so. So potential schedule for the board, 29th of August today, you're gonna get an update. We intend to come back to you the 24th of October. And really have some kind of final recommendations for the middle school and the high school. And get your feedback. We'd also probably include a conversation with Piper Sandler around bonding and what that looks like. Then we'd come back in November, and we would have everything wrapped up, ready to go. First meeting in December, we would do a first reading of a bond resolution. January, we would do a vote on a bond resolution, and then January and February, Matt would work with King County to get everything ready for the election, and then the 21st is the last day that we can file. Okay. Any questions around that? Okay. So I just want to introduce to you this concept of all the things that we're thinking about that need to go into the bond. So there's complete the IMS project. There is the must-do projects at the high school, and you're going to learn a little bit more about those today. There are program improvements at the high school, and we've very intentionally separated those out so that we don't get caught up with mechanical and electrical and fire alarm work. We also need to reimburse the CapTech fund for the concept design work that has been done. The board's going to have to make some decisions around whether we want to include the life safety project for this building, which included fire sprinklers and ADA access with an elevator. And then there are the ADA parking lot improvements we talked about for admin and Crest that create better ADA access to this building, better ADA access to Crest, and reconfigure some of that parking. And then we also talked about the potential of front funding in elementary school. So each one of those will have a basic project cost, and then some of those will need to be escalated, right? So if we are doing the IMS project and the midpoint of construction for IMS is January of 27, then we need to build into our bond 40 months of escalation. And we feel like it may be helpful to look at that escalation as a separate number and not wrap it into the project costs that you're going to see, so that we can play with, is it 4.5% or is it 5%? And it's certainly a changing market. And I know Director Blowitz will have a lot of input on that. And so we want to make sure that it's a clean item to look at. But, I'm giving you an example here. And obviously this is not the cost to complete IMS, but if you use the $1,000 number and you escalate that at 5% over 40 months, it becomes $1,067. So you can see that there's 16.7% escalation that needs to be added to a project that is, pushed out. Some of these will be different. The middle school and the high school are probably pushed out to that January 27 number. But the reimburse for CapTech has no escalation attached to it. The life safety and the ADA improvements would probably be able to happen sooner, and so we wouldn't have to escalate those as far. But when we come back in October, my plan is to share this with you with some real numbers and that start to give you a sense of what that total bond package could be, and can certainly play with it live and take things in and out and see what that means.
A quick question. So on these numbers, I know that middle school and high school are not the cost, but the others are closer to what it's going to cost, or?
Yeah, the reimbursed CapTech concept design, that's what we've spent to date. And I think I have like 50,000 of contingency in there that we may spend before we're all done. The life safety at the admin building and the ADA improvements, I just pulled those numbers from the long range facilities plan. Okay. Those are the same numbers we talked about then. We've gotten preliminary information back, and I think it's in that range or a little bit less. And then front fund and elementary, I think that That's our current estimate of what it would take to do a full study of the 3 sites. Are there any sites we can't build on in an occupied condition? And then do concept design for one.
And just kind of to reiterate, we went back and forth on what numbers to plug in for those first 3. And the last thing we wanted is for us to get to a point where someone wants to go back to this slide and catches a number and that they just can't forget that number. And so instead of getting out in front of the presentation, especially since it's a study session, you can see the escalation as 167 per thousand. You can do the math however you want, but we just did not want to commit the community, commit you as a board to any number at this point.
Right. Really just want to introduce you to the idea that this is how we plan to look at it.
Thanks.
Is the time frame just seems really far out to me. Is that just what it takes?
Well, you would, in theory, potentially pass a bond in 25. Then we have to bring on our alternative procurement partner. Then we have to actually do the full design and get to permit drawings. And then we have to have the city of Mercer Island permit it. And then we have to start construction. And it puts it in, both Methuen and I have been through it a couple times, and it puts us January 27 for the midpoint of construction.
Of actual construction or of the process?
Of midpoint of construction. So January 27, we would be halfway through the construction of the new building.
And are we looking at about a year-long actual construction phase? Or I guess I should ask.
About 18 months.
18 months, okay.
Yeah.
So kind of start in the spring.
Start in
summer.
June,
Yeah,
work the whole year, work through December and finish. Yeah.
that's what I meant. I meant what academic year is really impacted.
Yeah. Okay. 2 seconds. Okay, we have a lot to cover today, so let me get to this next slide. Ed and I had a meeting with OSPI and talked about the SCAP funding, and I think you're aware that there have been some changes to the square foot cost. They bumped that from, and what was it, 256 to 375 a square foot, and you'll see in the numbers today that school construction is still nowhere near $375 a square foot. What we determined with OSPI is that our K-8 eligibility, and that's how they look at it. They don't look at it as elementary or middle school. They look at it as K-8. That we have eligibility in 2026, and that at the high school level we have eligibility in 2030. So for a potential bond in 2025, approximately $4 million would be available for the middle school. None would be available for the high school. I think it's really important to remember that OSPI makes absolutely no guarantees that they've calculated that properly, and they reserve the right to tell you that you're not eligible for any funding when they actually do go through the D form process. And even if they tell you that you are eligible, there is no guarantee that they will pay it to you in the time that you need it for construction. And so we can have more conversation about this in the future. But, you know, our recommendation would be that we diligently get absolutely every dollar we possibly can out of OSPI for the middle school project, but that we use that money to pay down the bond rather than build it into our budget, so that you're not left in a bad position in the event something happens with OSPI. And it's tough because sometimes you don't get the answer to that until you've already started into construction. So I'm not telling you anything you don't know. Okay, with that, I'm going to turn it over to the Methuen team to talk about the next. Officially pass the clicker.
We'll try to move fairly quickly so we can leave room for conversation and questions as needed. Brendan Connolly with Methuen.
Joanne Wilcox with Dan.
There you go, I just.
And, oh, sorry,
No.
and Doug Davis Islander.
Great, and thank you, Brandon, for the framework and introduction. We were hoping to cover a couple of key things with all of you, talk maybe a little bit of a refresher around some of the kind of key guiding principles and design drivers that our team has established with this community over the course of the spring that have guided the design explorations in the summer. We have been, as Brandy suggested, busy over the summer months exploring a lot of different ideas and really kind of testing scenarios and program ideas and how we might fit things on the site in relation to phase one at Islander. We've started to get our first look and rough sense of kind of cost parameters and understanding kind of the implications and orders of magnitude. And this is a somewhat iterative and dynamic conversation. So we're just sort of a snapshot in time here. And then we have a schedule next steps, which Brandy's actually done a really amazing job of kind of outlining already for the larger process. So we won't spend too much time there. But one of our last conversations with you, we talked about the kind of path for Islander in terms of our overall process. We are in kind of this orange phase here, which is the kind of summer months where we met with you last, talking about our framework and vision and guiding principles, and really have spent the kind of last 2-3 months developing and looking at a lot more specific design ideas. So scenarios, starting to get initial information about cost and developing alternatives. And so Joanne will walk through those in a little bit more detail in just a moment. And then ultimately we are heading toward the fall, looking at refinement of a preferred scenario, really kind of honing in and aligning that fully with kind of the cost guidelines and aspirations for the project. Also really looking forward to connecting back with staff and community members and students as we kind of re-engage in this process. And then ultimately, I think we come back in October to speak with you again about where we are and the next recommendation. So key design drivers, just one or two kind of very important things. The target capacity for 1,000 students, wanting to kind of make sure we have the sufficient program to support that goal. And the program is a really sort of simple idea of a complete vision for Islander Middle School. And so this is a really important thesis point for all of us on the team, that we're trying to create a unified whole for this campus and this school, and really kind of have the sort of two halves feel like a complete thought and complete vision. And so this idea of unification, the word complete, has been very important in our conversations, both in terms of the project itself, but also the sense and kind of conveyance of that idea to the community. One building, one home, really creating an amazing experience for students and staff and community members, connecting and creating a safe campus that's fully accessible, supporting students, creating innovation that's visible and inviting. This is something we'll talk a little bit more detail. We have some great ideas that are starting to play out in the design itself. And then the idea that every space should have multiple functions and be agile in terms of its use and usability over time. So those are things that are starting to guide the process. And we're hoping to create spaces and ideas that are a little bit in the experiential realm of some of these examples of patchwork on the screen. The idea that these are really visible and flexible series of collaborative learning spaces, large and small, that we are creating visible innovation and linking this also to inspiring students and also linking inside and outside spaces in this program aspiration. And then also the idea that we are really dedicating a lot of our instructional space to CCR, STEM, STEAM type programs that are really starting to kind of bring a new level of thinking and experience for your students. So very excited about where this is going. None of these describe the exact design yet. We're a little early with more program bubbles, but these are inspirational images that help guide us. And lastly, this is a quick look at the program. So I'll go into detail here, but on the left-hand side, this is the existing phase one collection of program spaces with a very heavy weight toward physical education, a lot of assembly spaces and food service. And what we're creating is the balance of classroom space, special learning, shared learning, STEM space, some performing arts. And so it's a different sort of emphasis in this new phase, but a very important one to really complete that vision. And so I'm going to pass it to Joanna. She's going to talk a little bit more specifically about the campus and what we found this summer.
And Mary Jo invite team members to kind of like join in as able. I think importantly, the imagery that we just shared was also the experience that was collected through work with the steering group before the summer and with the leadership group over the summer. So those groundings have really then come into the campus experience, which is working with existing design considerations, existing sites as well. We know that we need the site to be efficient and safe during construction, even the note that we have a class that's impacted is really important. A lot of similar pieces as well. Security and understanding how we can increase security, increase outside space that feels secure, and the psychology of security, as well as kind of a student and staff centered environment. Efficient circulation, and I would say efficient circulation, but also the circulation path that flow easily. So sometimes we think efficient means one, and in this case, we actually think efficient means more than one. And so we'll talk a little bit about how that's been instrumental. And then really thinking about consolidation for cost and operational efficiency. How do we create a community that feels positive educationally, but also allows for operational and other points of efficiency. So we do have existing conditions. We are now starting with a blank slate. Phase one is in the lighter gray. Our existing buildings are in the darker gray. We've done a lot of work over the last few months to deeply understand what might be available for us to house students during construction. We have confirmed that it will be possible for us to remove the 100 building portion of the building, that we do have enough education spaces within that campus that we will not need a sea of portables, for example, somewhere located on the field or someone else on the site. We're still going through that work period by period and teacher by teacher, so to confirm that, but it's really great news, both for operational and cost perspective. And then what you're seeing here in the blue outline really is the area within which the new construction can occur, and the red is securing a safe passage for students and connectivity for the community during construction. So the construction phasing has really been instrumental in how we start to think about unifying community under one roof. Original design intention was to continue the corridor to the north. I think now having lived under that roof, team is sharing that there's a lot of congestion and flow that might happen with that model. And so really thinking about how can we continue the idea of moving further to the north, but wrap back in many ways to create multiple paths of circulation, multiple points in which we can create flow and connection. And what that also starts to do for us is create a secure inner heart of the building. So using the building itself to kind of wrap its arms around the students and staff, both in interior and exterior spaces as the program has been developing. That increased secure outdoor student space or interior sort of space really becomes effective and works when students move through it, when there's places of gravity or momentum on either side of it, so that it doesn't become a courtyard that isn't occupiable or that we're not moving through. And so really thinking about what are the programs that would then enhance students' movement and flow through those spaces has been part of our key considerations. And then really thinking about having an administrative team that is at the front door, welcoming front door, but also deeply connected with the students. As we begin to think about the footprint of wrapping the building back, we have a lot of great conversations about where administration might land. This thinking through if administration is relocated, then they would have really great supervision of bus, parent drop-off, front yard, as well as those student-centered spaces, be more immediately adjacent to the heart of where students spend their time, as well as connected to the commons. And we have thought through also the repurposing of that space in the administration space, but just wanting to kind of put that out in front. The other piece that we've been working with is really kind of the network of movement that happens on the existing campus, the distance the students are moving. What you see is just a random selection of classrooms that a student might experience on their day as they're moving throughout the existing campus, and an increase in efficiency and operational movement that consolidates and brings everyone closer together so that we can minimize the amount of time that's happening in that movement time. And then finally, really thinking through library right now as destination, that, you know, the team is really talking about. It's located on the second floor. It's not within the path of travel. It's underutilized or not as optimally utilized as Mary Jo and the team would really like. And so is there a potential, and the staff actually opened up this conversation with us to really think about what the library is and the library of the future. Does the library actually become something that is many pieces and parts that are more directly connected to learning spaces or shared learning space? And in fact, the image on the left, the staff that was working on this group actually took the little purple dot of library we gave them and ripped it up into many pieces. Not that that would be ultimately the design solution, but I think the conversation really lent us to, is there a opportunity for us to think about the library in such a way that it could be centered within the learning spaces with a close adjacency so that students are there every day, not as a destination, and can we then repurpose the existing library into education space? So those concepts really get us through the kind of key design considerations and move into then, once we have those pieces and parts, how might they come together? And the design options will invite some feedback. We've had great feedback with leadership team around what works and what doesn't, what matches the educational philosophy and pedagogy and where Islander really wants to head. And so this will be a tag team effort. Two strong design concepts really came forward. On the left, you see this idea of Stitch. We'll actually spend more time here today. Spatial typologies, types of spaces, programs are the same in both. What you actually see are two ideas that came from a similar configuration. Where our new learning spaces are really located on the right-hand side of each image. How they tie back to the existing campus and how the educational environment really performs is the difference. On the right-hand side, Butterfly centers loops of circulation around two exterior courtyards. On the left-hand side with Stitch, you'll see it really is about an exterior courtyard and an interior learning or learning commons that really are centering those two spaces. The design strategy around Stitch is really thinking about tying across to the dining commons, which of course then connects out to the fields, creating a space that's protected exterior space for students that is more social, administration right at the entry part of the campus, and then tying through a really activated, agile, flexible learning environment and learning commons within the heart of the learning spaces that ties really close with adjacency to the existing learning spaces that are there in phase one. On level one, reusing the parent pickup and drop off and the bus parking, really thinking about having an entry plaza. We'll talk a little bit about the performance component, which is something we're studying about whether or not there's an enhanced performance on site. But this really begins to think about a core academic space that has all of our learning components, hands-on science, STEM, STEAM, art in a nested kind of learning commons surrounding a space that is rich with shared learning and literacy. On the next slide, as we walk in that front door, again, not images that we're using to design towards, but the kind of feeling and emotion that the leadership team has been working with us over the summer to develop, that you come into something, you feel the porosity of the front entrance, the courtyard and the learning commons are there. I think one of the comments, Mary Jo, you said is that you want to walk in the building and see learning happening, not walk in the building and have to find it down a path. So you'd enter into the space, you'd be immediately connected to the courtyard and to the learning commons. It would be light filled. Thinking about that courtyard as a really durable space that could have easy flow inside and outside, a non-precious walkable surface that then can connect over to the commons and really re-engage the commons to actually also open into that courtyard. So we've got student flow through those spaces. And the secure connected core is really then supported by the collaborative immersive environment. Our classrooms kind of bookending both sides, the direct connectivity. This is where the learning commons starts to come in, the literacy and library, large and small shared group, shared learning. And maybe Mary Jo, you can talk a little bit about the type of shared learning you've been hoping for within this project.
Yeah, so we've been talking a lot about accessibility for teachers to take kids into a space where potentially curriculum materials are already there. There is tech available there. There is, research materials that are already there, as opposed to having to pull pieces from all over the building in order to be prepared to use a space. So really trying to have those centralized per content area, one that's focused on sciences, one that's focused on the humanities, where it is much more user-friendly and easier for teachers to access and kids to learn within those spaces.
And giving cues to education as well, really thinking about then, activated learning and hands-on learning as part of that core curriculum piece on both levels, first floor and second floor, embedding the STEM and STEAM and art studios in spaces that can really activate the shared learning as well, and use that for expanded space so that we can those areas. Talking about extending the space, carefully connecting to exterior, both covered and uncovered, where materials might be moving in, or projects that are too large for inside could be used on the exterior space, as well as then really thinking about this whole learning commons and this experience as we reach upstairs as an opportunity to drive light down into the lower floor. So it becomes a vertical connection and daylit center core as well. The idea about the second floor, really, again, bringing business and technology, the business center, to the heart of the classrooms, having that space actually immersed in the same way the literacy is, and then opening up on the second floor as well. Community hub and performance is one of the options that we're studying about what is performance at IMS, and can we expand that to think about what would a performance space at IMS be if it's also supported community. The proposal in this case would be to locate that either in this phase or a future phase within the front door component, so it's immediately adjacent to the parking lot, the entry, and directly connected to the existing community hub of the commons and the gym. And then really thinking about during construction, when the new addition is going on, maintaining that safe path of travel, existing operations would remain mostly untouched, and then planning for the future if there's increased capacity, making sure that any of the options that we're looking at, we're able to provide that. What I didn't touch on, I think I missed it, was the repurposing of the library and administration, counseling, and family youth services, and other programs that are in the new addition slide very well into that space. So minor modifications, if any, on the lower floor, and then the potential of transforming the library into teaching spaces with minor modifications. As we mentioned, there's two concepts the leadership group has really gravitated towards over the summer. Butterfly is a very similar experience, except instead of an interior learning street, it really is an exterior learning courtyard. We're not going to spend as much time, similar qualities and characteristics. I think that's why these two schemes really came to the top for the leadership group. There were others that we studied that didn't match those. So just really quickly, level one here on the lower floor, similar front door, similar location of performance, similar adjacency of all of the literacy, hands-on, shared learning components that we've talked about in the Stitch option. And then on the second floor, again, really repurposing that library to the classrooms very similarly, and then locating all of the classroom space on the second floor around an exterior courtyard.
Maggie, Ty, did you have a question?
Yes, excuse me, I do. You mentioned this idea of like a center core that's daylit and it's absolutely gorgeous in the drawings or the modeling, but I'm just curious whether you're taking into account, potentially rising temperatures, and whether that's something that we have to consider, like if it's absolutely gorgeous, but we have to pay a bunch of money to air condition the building because of it, or whether you've already got the technology in place or in mind to combat that.
Yeah. Thank you. Would it be all right if we respond to the question, Fred, or do you want?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So there's one elevation of that space that does face south. We would be looking at a high performance glazing there and with sun shading. And then most of the daylight opportunities, actually, we can get beautiful north clerestories or north light that really come into that core. So we're protected from direct sun, and we actually have opportunities to use that roof for solar. So it's a really great question, and certainly something that we would want to take to heart. One of the nice things about Stitch is the compactness of the exterior skin. And so when we think about operational efficiency, we have less insulation, or we have less skin with which we're losing energy essentially, or gaining heat. And so Stitch actually offers us an opportunity to be really compact with our energy use, as well as with the amount of heat load that we would have on the building.
That helps. Yeah. Just that I thought the same thing about with my type of different temperatures, but also the type of rain that we have now. It is downpouring instead of drizzle. So I think that having that one courtyard might be easier to handle for those claims at schools.
I couldn't agree with you more. That was something I stressed a few different times.
Yeah, and certainly that experience with the courtyard, making sure it's something that is porous paving, that drains, that is not a lot of mud and plants and high maintenance pieces have been part of it as well. Similar approach to phasing during construction or operations during construction, and similar study of future addition, making sure that it is a potential. Both of these schemes have been kind of run through the ringer in a variety of different ways. There's a lot of design work yet to do, and we have cost modeled both of these options. We just invite maybe some of, there was a clear preference from the leadership team today, and would kind of maybe ask you both to voice your whys or what you see as potential.
You want me to go first? Well, I am very partial to Stitch. I like them both. I think there are wonderful positivity, possibilities about both of them. Stitch to me brings our school together in a way that Butterfly doesn't quite do. So there's a lot more open, what I fear might be unused space in Butterfly, whereas Stitch closes us together. And I love the multi-pathways within the building that Stitch would allow for, not forcing our kids to go outside to access, leave one building and access another building. So that's one of my favorite parts about it. I also love that it would close potentially the whole front, instead of leaving a gate maybe or some fencing to do that. I think that would feel even more secure, and I think would add some real possibilities to our campus. Doug?
That's why you got to go first. I started out loving the Butterfly one. And then we looked at the Stitch one after, and I see all the things that Mary Jo already had to say about Stitch would be reiteration for me to go there. And I love the Stitch idea as well.
The other thing, I'm sorry, I talk too much, but the other thing too about that learning corridor is this idea that there are all kinds of different spaces within that corridor. So some that could close off, some that would be open and pass through, some that, are bigger and smaller. So just different uses for different contents for different reasons. And I really like that. It's not just one kind of thing that's repeated over and over just because it fits.
Mm-hmm.
So.
I could offer as well, the adjacency that you were talking about between that learning commons and the classrooms versus Butterfly was more of a destination that you might go to at other times. So thank you.
So I know we're getting thin on minutes, but these are two ideas that are going to the same framework of thinking. And I think we are planning through this conversation. I really appreciate the comments. But there was one that's standing out a little more in terms of its programmatic potential, but also its alignment with the cost. And that's something that we are starting to get a handle on. As we mentioned, this is fairly early in the cost modeling process, and there's a kind of a lot of different ideas on the table here. Without going into great detail, what we're trying to do is to sort of think about the completeness and making sure that what we can fit is achieving that goal, that it's also reflecting the district's values and achieving sustainability that is commensurate with the existing project, but also kind of the goals of the larger community and the surrounding school district. We want to create a durable and efficient project, and Stitch has some advantages with that relative to energy and also the use of materials. We're going to be looking at a lot of comparable projects and understanding how the market and what's happening there. That's already a conversation that's happening, and then looking at what the site and kind of the target building design, can sustain. And so a lot of work will be happening between now and when we come back in October, and it'll be an iterative process. And really, this is an abstract diagram, but it is a bit of a.
That's how last week felt.
That's true, actually. I think that is week over week, I'm sure you hear this anecdotally, but the cost of copper or windows or supply of certain materials affects these kind of forces, or the cost of money in the general market. So as we kind of move forward, those curves get tighter and tighter, and we have a more better understanding of the actual cost that we will be looking for the target value. And so these are some initial ideas of a rough order of magnitude, but what we are seeing is that Stitch is actually outperforming Butterfly fairly significantly in current dollars. And to Brandy's earlier comments, that this model would then also need to be sort of situated and calibrated to the midpoint of escalation or the future timeline that we just talked about this morning. But early look, but we are heading toward the target and have some more work to do to kind of tighten things up and refine our assumptions. But I think everyone's feeling good about the overall place that the program is heading, and this one option seems to be leaning a little bit more heavily in terms of meeting the goals than the other, but we'll be refining that as we move forward in the coming weeks. Also, in terms of base budget and the idea of enhanced options, there's an a la carte menu that we'll be also developing. That these are in addition to cost elements that could be added for value depending on which way the kind of marketing value and numbers fluctuate. So there's a number of ideas here that both indoor and outdoor space and some site improvements, but we will refine this list as well to come back with more detail.
And I would add, Brendan, that this list was generated not only through district conversation, but listening sessions, understanding, neighborhood need, for example, on, additional on-site parking. It doesn't just benefit necessarily the school or the district, but the parks nearby. So thinking about that as a potential, this entire list is really coming together from deep thinking in the process. And there's a few others as well that we're trying to figure out whether or not they'll also make it onto the list.
So with that, I think we're going to stitch this conversation together and the rest of us with new conversation. We talked a little bit about next steps, and we'll come back in a few months as we kind of continue to refine these options. But a lot of great conversations that we're looking forward to in the next few weeks and months. Thanks for everyone's time.
Thank you. Thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Oh yeah, I'm just wondering, how are you guys gonna choose like which model, like butterfly or stitch gets like implemented?
Can I respond that in a perfect world, the option is actually choosing itself, and the alignment of the educational goals and the cost model and all of the pieces start to come together in one piece. I think that we're going to go back to the steering committee and hear in listening sessions with student staff and really understand educationally which one is better aligned, and then kind of move from that place forward. But the goal is really that it's not necessarily the architects choosing, it's the users and the functionality of the building that's choosing and the budget is choosing.
Yeah, I just want to say one thing is like the high school, we have 2 courtyards and we only really use one.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's just the thing.
They're also very underutilized, like during the winter time, because it just gets really wet with all the rain and like
Yeah.
everything.
I bet the next team that's up at the table has lots of ideas how to make that.
It's like,
Any other questions, concerns, comments?
I will say that I love the design, that they look beautiful.
Yeah,
They really do, and I love how they do kind of, and I love that we're not using pork. I think that's very, it's very wise.
I don't know how you escape that. We'll see.
Very well said.
So, and I appreciate also the comparison with the like, all the numbers, yes.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to say that I'm really appreciating this process, that it seems very thoughtful and like you're really going to come up with something that is genuinely going to meet the needs of like today's students and today's staff. And it's not like a top down, like the district being like, you need a bigger building or whatever, like it's not bottom up either. It's sort of like middle up and middle down, kind of like all directions, so it's like, you're going to be listening to the students, you're listening to the teachers, you're listening to the administrators. I love the kind of connectivity of it. I've always been very happy about the first half of the middle school rebuild. So I'm looking forward to this. My youngest child just started middle school, and the first day of school, she wore these very fancy platform boots. And she came home at the end of the day and she was like, I need to wear really comfy sneakers because I have to walk so much between my classes and I have to do it fast. So she'll be happy about this, even if it doesn't happen while she's still there.
I did find a bunch of Band-Aids today making ties. So I think lots of kids are feeling that.
Yeah. So thank you.
we'll look forward to fewer blisters. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, team. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
I will just say that there are so many ways that these projects are completely different. And there's a few ways that they're alike, but the process we've been going through on the high school, as you'll see, and I don't know if you were able to look at the video that Nayland took the time to record, but we're going to be looking at these very differently, right? The middle school is a whole package with some potential adds, and the high school is really deciding what those priorities are and how far we go. Okay, so with that, I'll turn it over to our.
Thanks for introducing. We're with Bela, as you know, David Mount.
Becky Hutchinson.
Sunny John.
And fourth team member, Claudia Saunders, you certainly got to see her on the video. Claudia's conveniently planned 2 vacations for both of the board meetings that were with you. So the videos have been a great opportunity for her to also explain the process that she's has a significant hand in. And we hope you had an opportunity to see the video. As Brandy said, there's been a lot of work done over these past few months on the high school. And beyond the team here, it's expanded to engineers, landscape architects, cost estimators that have really been helping us get to the point where we are today, in addition to several meetings with the leadership team led by Tony and Brandy, Ed, and Principal Wold, and others. So with that, today what we hope to be able to share with you is really a moment for us to pause after our second phase of work to make sure that we're being transparent and being clear about the process we've been through, really share the development of the projects. And if you recall, we talked around project pairings and how we were bringing groups of projects together. So we'll be sharing that largely in the video, but we want to be able to answer some of your questions on that. And of course, cost, critical, particularly as we're looking to prioritize at the high school to understand sort of magnitude of cost of each one of these projects, and then confirm that we are on the right track and you all are ready for us to move on to the next phase, which is truly the prioritization and making of the packages for the bond. So today we'll touch on our overview process, which you all have seen before, but we'll share a lot about this latest phase. We're going to really pause at the project pairings, hoping that with the videos, there might be some questions and we can jump forward to specific projects and specific questions you have, because as you all saw, there are a number of projects there that we couldn't quite get through in the time we have today. This evening, and then talk about what our next phase would look like.
Thanks. Okay. So here we are on the process overview. We've really stayed the course, true to what we set out to do at the beginning of this project. And I remember that first get meeting with Ava, where we said our goal is to identify targeted building renovations that will maximize positive academic and social impact to the student experience. That's really been our North Stars through this whole process. And you know, what the work that we've been doing over the summer and leading us to really focuses on this final bullet point, which is prioritizing the needs, though without committing to resolve all of them, you know, that could become you know, included in your 2025 bond. So our fun project schedule. The last time that we met with you, we were at the end of that first phase we called gathering. That was really anchored on how to capture, listen to community voice, gather the needs, and start to synthesize them into what might the appropriate projects to actually address needs look like in order to have that positive impact for the Mercer Island High School and Crest buildings. And here we are now meeting with you today at the end of our summer phase. So what we just want to make sure that we are reminding is that the outcome of that first gathering phase really were these 4 guiding principles: to encourage personalized passions and interests, to create community and foster belonging through relationships, to prioritize holistic health and sustainable comfort, and to embrace innovation and dynamic evolution. Again, you know, this is, these were guiding principles developed by the GET, and that really came out of those months of listening we did with the community. So it truly is, you know, how your community telling this board how they want the work that they'd like to see at the high school really impacting and making change for them. So we have over the summer been in our testing phase, and really our focus there has been to clarify the potential project scope and cost. And we've been doing that by testing various projects, testing them against, you know, what kind of impact does this, you know, particular combination of projects afford us? And in doing so, how are we finding the most viable options from them? So this is just a reminder of what we showed you the last time, how we were going to start to work with these individualized needs, how we would start to pull them together, and then start to locate them kind of within the school and tie them back to those guiding principles. over this summer, we've sort of taken that example and we've applied it to all of the projects that were on that list. So our process again was really to test and organize these pairings. And we did that in such a way to minimize the options and variables. So how can we get, as specific as possible and as known as possible in what we're working with? In doing so, we provided detailed narratives and sketches so that we could really proof out these pairing options. And that's where, as David said, we were working with our engineers, we were working with the cost estimator to dial in what these options could afford. And through that, we were collecting constructability input. So the outcome was that we took those 52 individual projects and we actually paired them into what are now 21 projects. So again, looking at this overview, here are those original 52. And again, we think it's really important to show you that we have not forgotten anything that we've heard. There is a way of tracking it so that whether or not it is addressed in an upcoming bond, that the need was recorded, and that we can all collectively make a plan around how and when it will be addressed. What we've called out here with the big number 2 are 2 projects, which is upgrading and replacing the fire alarm system and upgrading and replacing the HVAC system, which have through our process been identified really as essential work. This work has to happen really for the health of the building and to enable other projects to happen. What then is dashed in 19 is to say that the remainder of those projects have been grouped into 19 pairings, which are basically open for prioritization and evaluation through the upcoming process. And then in the lower right, we have a list of projects that have been listed under Cap Tech, meaning that the need has been identified and Cap Tech, it's expected that Cap Tech dollars will actually cover that need. And finally, the deferred list. So that through conversations with leadership and evaluation with the engineers and the cost estimator, it was determined that these projects are likely not good candidates for consideration in the upcoming bond. So the need is tracked, but they're not included in the project pairings that we studied this summer.
Can I ask a quick question?
Please.
This might be also for Brittany. So the revelation that we need to do to meet the standards that the state is requiring, environmental, I don't know, but they're reflected in this list, or how will they pair with this remodel?
We are in the process of applying for what's called an early adopter acceptance, and the district has managed to get all of the buildings to comply with the clean building standard.
Right.
And so there is no specific required energy work to meet that standard. And we are quickly applying for early adopter status that will certify that. And then depending on when that certification date was for the size of the building, so the high school and the middle school and the elementaries all became, have to comply by different years. That will get us to that year and then through the first period of 6 years past that. So we're feeling in really good shape. It doesn't change that there are still mechanical, electrical things that need to be done, but we don't have to do anything solely to comply with the state.
Which is, yeah.
It's great news.
Yep. So through the Cap Tech, we've obviously done a lot, and I was on a call with a few different superintendents a couple weeks ago, 2 from the east side of the state and then some on the west side. And, I think there's a huge range of what school districts are going to confront. And we are in a really different space than some other places just because of the work that we've done along the way. I think we're going to hear that a lot more in Olympia or whatnot about that. But we've been able to make a lot of progress. And some of it's just been being much more intentional, even around holidays and some of those. And you saw some of the savings, I think, last year that we've been able to do and turn back in. So
it will be a smooth transition to you. Okay.
Thank you for that clarification, though. I want to just again, bring forward the different factors and variables that we've been working with in the project scope column, in the constructability column, all that have led us to understanding this cost range for each of the project pairings that we've, put forward to the board today. So it's everything from, looking at the current codes and regulations, looking at the existing condition of materials and equipment, looking at the amount of area that would need to be impacted, and looking at, in creating these project pairings, synergies, between how, if we're working in this area, can we find these kind of natural alignments to grab and make updates in this other area, which might be adjacent, and working with our engineers in particular to understand impact to systems and, the level of complexity that these potential modifications, could have. And ultimately then, that leads us to that cost range that we've shared today. So I know Brandy has said it, and we're going to keep reiterating. We want to be really clear that the costs that we're sharing are in today's dollars, but as shown in the kind of introduction or opening of this board study session, these projects are projected out, and where midpoint of construction could be like those 40 months in the future, and that escalation would need to be added to the cost that you're seeing. So just as a way of summarizing our process here, it is to say that pending outcome of today's conversation and decision by the board, the plan would be to move into a prioritization phase where we would be working again with Ava and the GET to try to evaluate these project pairings, and then tied back to guiding principles, ultimately make a recommendation to the board. So, as David suggested, with the project pairings, and given that there are 21 that we have given project pages on, what we wanted to do is kind of introduce again them in list form here, but then rather than running through each of the projects, actually invite questions that you might have, and you could help guide us into where you'd like to spend your time today and where we can offer more clarifications. So we've broken out, those 2 projects that we're putting in that essential work category, and the remaining 19 in the kind of to be prioritized category. And I hope it's okay. Everyone's brain works a little differently, but we chose an alphabetical ordering to try to eliminate sort of bias or hierarchy or hidden agendas that could be read into putting any project at the top of the list. And we just want to call forward that most of these are standalone projects, but it is just this combination of the radio broadcasting and robotics and classrooms in the 300 wing that could have some linkages based on, a potential relocation of the radio broadcasting program, across the hall that would have a domino effect into these other 2 projects. But otherwise, we feel confident that the projects as paired today really I don't know, Andreeves, if there's a way to resize to the screen. Do all have pretty discrete kind of scopes of work or areas of impact that could allow for a kind of a la carte selection according to prioritization work to come. So here would be the pause then, and does the board have any specific questions or areas of interest even that we could jump to?
Okay, I think one thing that might be helpful is to share what that huge range on the HVAC consists of, from the $9 million version to the $35 million version.
Oh, that was Thanks for the invitation, Randy. So that range is the largest range of any of the projects that we've put together to share today. And the reason why it is different than others is because there are actually still a lot of variables, in those numbers, and because it comes down to what the level of work would want to be, actually would come out of more discussion around need, priority, and sort of goals for the kind of cost we want to put into that system. David, do you want to go into some specifics there?
Sure. So there are actually 3 tiers that are within that range there. The initial one would really be going in and very targeted evaluation of all of the major equipment and targeted replacement of specific moving parts within that equipment. So you're really extending the life of the existing equipment that is generally in industry terms, it's come to the end of its useful life for the duration, when the building was originally done. So that would be the air handling units and some of the main plant systems like boilers as well. The sort of second tier takes that a bit further, and you're replacing whole units and including the boilers, but you're leaving all of the ductwork in place, you're leaving all the piping in place, and you're essentially getting the same system you have today, but with newer equipment than equipment that actually has been moving for 25, 30 years now.
I think the other thing with those first 2 tiers is we would do a full recommissioning.
Yes.
And balancing of the building, and replacement of all of the controls.
Yeah.
So that would, it would go a long ways to getting that building back to how it functioned originally. And over 27, 28 years, there's been a lot of tweaks and changes and rooms that have been built and things that have been changed that have affected that. The far end of the scale.
Far end of the scale is really rethinking the system where you're replacing the type of system that it is, and primarily the big benefit is adding cooling as well. So now you're adding cooling capacity both in your plant with chillers, and you are then piping that chilled water out to each classroom, each office, adding new equipment at those localized areas, and creating that benefit of having the cooling within the school as well. So primarily that's in addition to all the replacement of the major air handling units as well.
So the first 2 tiers do not have like.
They do not have cooling. So it stays very much as, bringing the system that is currently there back up to sort of new status in the second scenario, into reconditioned status in the first scenario, and then but no cooling.
And what's the cooling situation at the school now? Is it?
Is there limited cooling?
So we currently have cooling in the gym, the Performing Arts Center, the main office suite, the counseling area, and then in the library, and then at the far end of the 300 hall, which used to be the computer lab. I can't think of the classroom number. Sarah's classroom. So anyhow, there are a couple of spaces down at the park.
Not my class.
But no, there's not.
Majority of the classrooms are.
As we make selections, I know we kind of talked about this a little bit in planning for this. It's my understanding that if the investment that we put in, if we don't go for the full tier 3, a tier 1 investment can lead to a tier 2, which can lead to a tier. I mean, it will never totally renovate the whole thing in a tier 3, but you can make improvements along the way in multiple bonds over time. Is that correct?
You'd certainly between 1 and 2, you can, and planning for tier 3, for 3 in the future, there can be some smart decisions to allow that to happen.
And I was gonna ask if it could be partial, I know that there are some areas, could we expand that without doing the whole thing?
You're bringing in a new chiller for sure. So you'd want to understand whether you're sizing that for a future to do the whole thing, or whether you would do it more modular. But certainly you could incrementally scale it back to just a portion.
And I think I would add to that, Deborah, virtual it's the piping that goes along with that, right? So to want to expand it, you're having to run the pipes from the chiller unit at the opposite end of the building throughout the entire campus to wherever. So you'd want to think about where you want to expand it, because we're talking thousands of feet of pipe down and back in order to make those changes.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, if we chose to do, we have summer school, we have students in the building in the summer. Do we want one set of classrooms to make sure that, it's reasonably comfortable? I don't know. I don't have the answer. That's what's going through my head. And then, are there different options in terms of cooling, like we have for residential, in terms of the heat pump type versus AC unit type, or is it much more limited?
There are different options. In this case, understanding the magnitude of the cost here, we are going with what we think is the most cost effective, which is a chiller system and not a heat pump system as well.
We have a lot more work to do
Yeah.
on this item, in the next phase. And, you know, we also are thinking about, you know, is there a way to provide partial cooling? Where we're not, you know, bringing it down to 68 degrees all summer, but are we able to bring it to 78 in the shoulder seasons? Is there an option for fans in the classroom like we have at IMS that make a huge difference? Maybe not in summer school necessarily, but certainly in the shoulder season. So all of that stuff is still.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, since this is such a huge cost that, you know, I think the community is going to have a lot of questions, and this is going to be a place where people are asking those and having those answers and really living it to what people are willing to pay. But having that information for them, I think is going to go, having that information up front is going to really go a long way.
And to add to it, even with tier one, I know Ava and students like you have shared that it's not comfortable in some of these classrooms, but because of how old the system is already is currently, by selectively replacing them under this tier one assumption, you will improve your comfort level within these spaces already and extending the life expectancy of these systems.
Is it typically a heating issue or a cooling issue?
I was gonna say heating, because like at least like cooling, I'm pretty sure like even today, like got up to like 77 degrees. People are still wearing sweaters in the hallways and like, so I feel like cooling isn't an issue. It might be different during summer school, but heating is definitely like the big one. And I also wanted to ask like, what's like the main difference between like tier one and tier two, like in terms of like the effectiveness? Is there like a way to measure that?
The big difference between those two are going to be preventing future replacements of systems. So it's a more of a shorter term, I would say, solution. I think that's accurate to say, with replacing the things that need to be replaced today in tier one, with the idea that you would probably need to be replacing things in, you know, in the relatively near future of expanding that.
Yeah.
And you know, that's going to require going piece of equipment by piece of equipment, evaluating what conditions and how they
Measure the
Yeah.
lifespan.
And if we were able to have a plan with, I assume we could do that throughout the years with Cap Tech, and would it be hugely impactful to students to be able to do that, or is that something that could be done in the summers with minimal?
I think the way we looked at, you know, tier one, if you were to ask Tony, he would say that's not enough. That tier two is, and I think tier two takes us from 9 million to 13.5 or something. It's not a full point.
Yeah.
But that gets to the point that we heard a lot about, which was in the wintertime, I have to wear layers because I go into one classroom and it's 60 degrees, and then I go into another classroom and it's 80 degrees, right? So I think that it would address that. But it would definitely mean that in future bonds, you would need to be thinking about another chunk of money that would go to replace equipment that we've stretched as far as we can. And it would continue to build.
I just wanna bring this to the board, and I remember in past meetings that when we talk about the school calendar and how to move it, one of the concerns especially from the union, it was that you could not move it a lot just because of the weather, that there was no like you could not put it early or not the case of this year because it's very cold summer, but usually it has been stretching the hotter days over September, and it is an issue for classrooms and for teachers to kind of how to handle school. So we don't know how climate change is going to affect in the next 30 years, but we have to consider that in terms of that might impact the quality of learning for.
And I think, you know, that what tier two would probably do is get the whole system rebalanced, get the new controls in, potentially get fans in classrooms to see if that is enough. And if that isn't enough, then the next phase could be to add cooling, but we wouldn't have done anything that would prevent that or work that had to be ripped out or changed.
Maybe.
Magpie?
Yeah, that does sound very reasonable, that level 2 approach. And it does sound like I know we can't model it to compare, you know, the cost of like the heating and cooling bill versus the cost of, you know, the fixes, but it does sound like over time we will certainly save money if we're not like heating some classrooms to, you know, 86 degrees and other classrooms are freezing, right? Like in your own house, that would be very inefficient and would lead to like kind of churn in the system, you know. So to Deborah's question, it sounds like the level 2 approach would not involve like ripping all the ductwork out of the wall. So it sounds like to me like that's something that can be done more with less of an impact on, you know, usability of like a classroom or a hallway or whatever, if it's more sort of centralized. That's just more a comment than a question. I do have a question though, if you can go back a few slides. There was one that showed like robotics, like option 2, where it looked like there was maybe a building in the, it looks like maybe a space built into that courtyard back by the band wing, right? Is that what that is? And what's robotics option 1? Oh, I see it now. I didn't see it before.
Yeah, I'd be happy to go to that project page. And we'll probably be wrapping up at that point. Thanks for asking. So you guys have hit on our 2 anomalies, which does make sense. The HVAC, which had the largest cost range of any projects we shared today, and then robotics, which is the one project that we actually have 2 options on the table for, that we've been exploring 2 options for. So when we get there, the reason for exploring 2 options actually comes back to what we shared in that list, which is that depending on the decisions around the radio and broadcast project, that has an impact on what potentially we might do with robotics. Okay, we're getting to our R's.
I am so sorry. I didn't mean to make you jump this far ahead.
That's why we're here, to jump around. So because radio and broadcast, the proposed project would be to actually move radio and broadcast across the hallway. And when you move it, what it does is it actually opens up, you know, its space. And so with robotics, which I don't know how the alphabet helped us there, they wound up back to back, but this option 1 suggests, there's then the potential to take that program and relay out that space vacated by radio broadcast and turn it into the new robotics lab. The reason why we've identified area in the courtyard as potential work is thinking about how robotics could start to use outdoor space as part of the program, because we know that especially for the club, when they're practicing with their competitions, they need a lot of area, larger than probably the building footprint we can likely dedicate for that single program. But you know, if radio broadcast doesn't move across the hall, then we don't have that area to backfill. So another way we could look at addressing the needs identified in robotics would be in place. And so that's where we have option 2 here. So it would be still looking at an expansion of that program by actually stepping into the classroom that's adjacent, as well as then that, you know, same considerations to how to improve the immediately adjacent site area to support that program.
That's great.
If we go with 1,
Yeah.
what would be used for 2?
Oh, so 2, we certainly have heard that having a variety of classroom sizes is a benefit to all of the different types of classes and programming that happen. So I believe that would more conversations to happen, but it would just be still used as an educational space. And it could get subdivided to be, you know, have smaller areas for more aligned to the general purpose classroom sizes, but then still likely, because of the configuration bump out, still have some larger spaces for flex use.
One more comment on option 1, why that's, you know, the idea was brought forward. It actually brings them closer to the commons as well. While the outdoor is great for, you know, part of their season does allow for some outdoor use, the commons is still going to be the primary practice space, bringing them a lot closer.
I do see that was our half hour with you. Does anyone have any?
I have a question. In the video, you talked a lot about making inclusive bathrooms,
Yeah.
which is great, of course, obviously. But I'm just wondering, and you could just tell me like, yes, this is best practice, shared each. But
like, I'm thinking to like the new bathrooms at CTAC, for example.
Yeah.
We know which have like floor to ceiling doors on the stalls and then shared wash space. And I'm wondering, are there like sort of parameters for school bathrooms that we need to take into account? And just the general feeling of sometimes maybe not feeling like, Christina and I were talking about this today, but, you know, reflecting on going into like a college dorm bathroom that was, you know, inclusive and not feeling exactly safe in there because of the closed environment. Like, I'm assuming that there's a lot of study about how to make educational bathrooms safe
Yeah.
or comfortable.
Yeah,
or-
I think that one to address specifically the question you had, you know, making them as open as possible so there are multiple entries, views in, allows for that type of feeling safe. You know, often when you're referring to maybe old style dorm shared bathrooms, it might not feel, you know, there might be one way, and even single gender bathrooms with one way in, they can often not feel safe. So thinking about the openness of those, of the shared area, the wash areas, and then certainly having full height partitions or walls and doors that are, you know, feeling acoustically separated and are part of the parameters. There's lots of best practices in there that we're learning in there as well.
And is there a real problem there with like real life teenagers getting into shenanigans in the bathrooms where like, you know, they have to be more sort of visible? I mean, I'm assuming that.
Yeah, there are different ways to show indication if someone's in there. You know, automatic sensors that, you know, indicate that there is actually, you know, someone in there that is turning the light on and you can see the light, you know, over the door. Having some sort of sense of adult eyes on those bathrooms as well certainly is helpful. That it's also, you know, that is probably the most significant concern, but it also does seem to have been alleviated by a lot of just education
And I'm sure there's people in this very room that think a lot about the trouble teenagers get into in the bathroom. I'm the last person. Oh, no, they're angels. It's like a dream.
I have a different question than her, but I just want to add to her comment. Because this was something that I commented with my daughter when we went to the doors of the university, how it was a feeling of a gut feeling that we both felt unsafe going to those bathrooms. So as a feedback, maybe to go back to the students, and especially those who on those situations might be feel vulnerable, that will be maybe those students that this is meant to be. And also the reality is that women around the world do feel unsafe in different environments, so do listen to the girls. About it. So just as
yeah, absolutely. There'd be a lot of engagement with students and
yeah,
staff around that.
It's very interesting.
Often there are also options, you know, single occupant bathrooms with sinks in them that we can go just into that, you know, as if it was a staff room, but available for students.
And I will say that as girls, some of the bonding also happens in the bathroom.
Yeah.
So having bathroom for girls makes it happen more. It is, I don't know why that happens. So, but my question, the question that I have is related to the JV fields. So I noticed that it's only the upper JV field, but it doesn't, is it the football JV field, but not the soccer field, or which one?
There's the stadium and then there's the field.
But there's another one on the back that soccer upper north, and I think that is I didn't know that it existed until 2 days ago that my son said that he only plays when it's dry, because if it's very wet, usually they have to move to a park in the and for us he plays with the frisbee, but he said that it's the soccer field. So I was curious if that is not being touched at all, or only is football, or which sport are we choosing that is gonna be has a privilege of having it?
Yeah, I haven't seen the scheduling, Tony. You may know the scheduling of the fields better and who's using which ones. We also know that you know, we've got fields on the south end too that are all now turf with some of that. But Tony, on the scheduling on that, what does that look like?
So if we move forward with the JV field, which is right just adjacent to the high school, it would be lined for multiple sports. So it would be lined for soccer, it would be lined for football, it would be lined for lacrosse. For instance, this, coming into the fall season, we have football, we have girls soccer. It's a busy time and we're constantly bouncing back and forth, making sure that everyone has the turf time on this site. So I think if that field became a turf field and lined for multi-sports, the actual amount of time being used on the upper north field would probably go down because we wouldn't have as much the flexibility. We're building the flexibility into the space, so we're not having to bounce around as much. And depending on how we line that field, you could actually get multiple sports. You could run 2 soccer teams running in east and west instead of 1 north and south for practice. There's a lot more flexibility that would come into that.
And the other, like the tennis court and the other part will not touch that for just practice, correct? If that, and that's great, not just clarifying.
Currently, in this particular project, we don't, we don't have the tennis courts, but we would add the capacity for lighting at the JV field, and we would run that conduit out to be able to come at it from the other side with tennis and connect to that in the future.
I think it's also important to remember that we just did tremendous amount of work at South End. No, just to tell our students that those fields are for the high school to use, and they're choosing not to. So when I hear we have this bad access, it's like, well, you're making a choice, and that's okay. They can make that choice to practice at 8, from 8 to 10 p.m. because they want to be here instead of a field that's ready, willing, and waiting for them at other hours. So they're important questions to ask, but there's a lot of availability.
So I just needed to make sure that I knew that. Yeah, I didn't know the field.
I know that but that field I know has huge drainage issues, and that one's going to be the north, not even the JV. The north one is even worse, right?
It can be, yes, and it depends. There's certain sports that take a little harder toll on the field, and it's hard to recover. So anytime you have the natural turf field, it takes the downtime to recover it. There are certain sports that focus on different areas that really put a lot of pressure on the grass. So, and we're, what Director Lori said, it's an operational fix, and the South Mercer playfields are still relatively new. We're working into that operational process to get our kids down there and to be using those fields for different things. So we're definitely learning, and we're using it more than we did last year. And I think we'll continue to see increased use going down it.
I don't have more questions.
What?
I don't have more questions.
Okay.
Can I just say, I'm sure you're not done, but I just want to say that it's very much secondhand fun, but I very much appreciate you putting the video in. Like, I don't enjoy having to watch the hour-long video, but I enjoy having watched the hour-long video. I really feel like I'm getting a good understanding of what you're presenting, and it's much easier to then follow along and be more engaged now. And I know it takes a lot of time and effort to put it together, so I really appreciate it afterwards.
Thank you, thank you.
One question I have before we start our discussion is, I know we're going to get the question about, in terms of the projects that aren't on, and especially at least a cover for the stadium. Would it be beneficial? How much work would it be? And would it be beneficial to have some sort of number to say, this is what it would take to do this project now, or it's not even feasible because we don't have that infrastructure, and that we're like, do you get my question? Like, we're going to get that a lot, like with the air conditioning. I think that one would be really good to have a good answer on.
The covering the grandstands at the stadium means that we have to pull all of that out and build new retaining wall and relocate detention. And I think in the long range plan, we, threw some big numbers out, but it's not a $10 million project. It's not a $25 million project. It's more. And I think we would need to spend a lot of time. We need to bring a geotechnical engineer out. We need to bring civil and structural, and the likelihood of that being prioritized over the other projects. We just felt like it was not money well spent.
And I'm not looking for like that level. I just think I know the question is going to be asked because it is constantly. So to be able to say we're talking about a $50 to $75 million project to do the stadiums.
I think you could say we're talking a $25 to $50 million project.
Okay, I think having that answer with all of the things that kind of need to happen as a result would, I think that would help us.
Yeah, I think something you could say as a board member is a community member might be looking at it as you're putting up some posts and beams
But a
and you're
giant
covering it
commercial
up,
site
right? In reality, as soon as we start messing with that area, we're gonna run into a bunch of more codes, and we're gonna run into all these other things that we're gonna have to do, which is leading to these other projects. So if it was just putting up structure, that's one thing. It's just not.
Right, yeah. So, but I think having that answer and without doing any more work than you've already done, I mean, personally, I don't know.
Well, I remember Brandy talking about this at a previous meeting because I had a community member talk to me about it forcefully. And I sort of gave them Brandy's version of like, going into the attic and seeing asbestos and closing the door and never looking again. because, it's just too expensive to even undertake it. And they had no idea and they were completely convinced. So I think it is an effective argument. If you could like thumbnail it maybe for us, but please don't do any more work because I think what you said just now is perfect.
Yeah. I mean, shouldn't say this out loud in public, but I know we did the engineering, had the engineers look at it to see whether or not it was holding, and it is, and we're in good shape structurally now. So,
Yeah, Maggie Tide has her hand up.
I just wanted to say, I was just talking today to a friend whose husband is an architect, and they were talking about their own house. And she said, yeah, we're not doing anything right now because my husband calls that pulling on the thread. Like if the minute you start, pulling on the thread of something in your house that you want to change, it ends up being like this like massive, expensive thing. So I think that's a perfect illustration of that concept. It's like, seems easy, just like yank this little thread and it's actually like a whole, kettle of worms, to mix my metaphors.
Do you have any other parts of the presentation, or are we good to open it to?
I think we're good to open it. We wanted to talk about our next steps, but I think that's clear where we're moving into the prioritization phase based on approval to go down to the next steps. And we'll be working with our guidance and evaluation team, who will really help us hone and connect those to the guiding principles. And we'll be working with our leadership to really balance that with those essential and must-do projects as well. So we'll plan to bring back in October.
Great.
Anything else?
No. My question is about like timing with all these separate projects. I assume, say we give the go ahead to kind of do these as laid out. Is your thought, and this is just a simple answer needed, like, is it, would it kind of be a staggered approach in terms of what makes sense to do kind of when, or would everything be tackled at once, or?
I think there's a slide that Becky reviewed in the recorded presentation that shows you the pre-escalated cost. The 2024 cost is about $100 million for all of the projects at the high school. Is that about the right range? And so I think what we anticipate is that we might make a recommendation to the board, or the board may decide kind of how deep into that list of prioritized projects you want to go, how much you feel can be included in this first bond. And so I don't think we have any illusions that you're going to be able to go all the way with the middle school and the other things, but how far you go, it will be the question.
But if we did like say half of them, then would we do them all at once? Or
It would have
is it
to be
more like
staggered.
we're working in the gym, we're working in the pack, we're working in the.
There's nowhere else for those kids to go. And so we would have to take it in small increments, right? And,
If we go online for a year.
Yeah, they wouldn't mind. We get no feedback about that.
Where's my letter of resignation?
Yeah.
Just kidding. Deborah, I'm just kidding. Just kidding.
Yeah, and I think, we also, in that escalation number, need to understand what the board would likely support. And I think that's an October conversation, so that we can figure out what that midpoint of construction might be, because it could be different for the high school, depending on how we tackle those.
Okay.
Over time.
you all already had the conversation around the benefits of the GCCM, and one of those being the complexity of logistics of the occupied site and having that partner on board to really plan what that sequence might look like.
So we need to have a discussion so that we can give direction moving forward. So let's just kind of do it. Let's do project by project. So let's start with the middle school. And we're really just giving direction on, we like what we see, we intend on, it seems like a scope that is manageable, that it's something that we want to move forward and move on to the next step is
Yes.
where we're at.
Yep. We just need to know, are we on the right track?
We're not deciding butterfly versus
you know,
stitch.
that next phase is we've got to do, you know, all, now the next phase of work, you kind of saw the different ways they've envisioned that, but we need to know if we're on the right track. You want us to continue with the goal of getting into that November, December with something that you could then make the decision of whether or not you wanted a bond resolution.
I think it looks like it's a perfect plan.
Yeah.
To go forward for the next phase for middle school.
Right, sure. Was that a thumb or a hand? Thumbs down, okay. Sure. Anyone else have any other feelings on that? Okay, all right. Looks like there's consensus for the middle school. High school.
Yeah, I think I'm looking forward to, you know, moving out the projects and seeing the community priorities and all that. And I think it's, you know, obviously thoughtfully approached and ready to see where we go next.
I think I agree. I think that the next phase is on you on the community, and is to move forward to prioritizing it. I think what we really can do.
McIntyre.
Yeah, I just think it's interesting how different these two projects are, right? Because the middle school is like a completion of a project that was started years ago, and we've had a chance to kind of do half of it and then see how that sits, and you know, it's different because of the level of the schooling, and you know, it's not so many separate programs, that kind of thing. So it's just interesting. The high school puzzle has a lot. I mean, it literally looks like a puzzle. It has a lot more moving pieces to it, and I think it's going to be more of a balancing act to try and figure out like what's a priority and what project goes with what, and you know, it's decisions that will affect our kids' ability to take part in these, you know, learning opportunities for like, you know, decades to come. So it's high stakes. So I think the way it's headed right now seems fine, excellent. Like I can't think of any easier. There's no way to make it easier, you know. So I give it a thumbs up for where it's at right now.
The way the question, I think it's a great process. I really like where we are. I really appreciate how you paired the projects. It makes a lot of sense. My concern is when it's going to come down to choosing and making sure that it's the highest need comes first and not the loudest voices, and you know, numbers of students impacted matters, but it also doesn't, that shouldn't be anywhere near like the most important decision. So I guess I just want to make sure that there are multiple ways of gauging that. I appreciate when you guys talked about having the leadership team so that they can really give an unbiased view of that educational need and the need for the building versus, you know, what's shiny and pretty and might be fun and nice, but you know, we've got anyways, that's my concern, is that we choose the right projects for the right reasons. And I know that's your focus as well. And I just want to make sure that the broader community is very much has voice in that. And I know that you will, but you know, even more than the get, that there's a broader community voice with that. I think with the middle school, it's not as important because we all know, I don't think there's really any disagreement on the project, but with this, there's going to be lots of opinions and we need to hear them because, you know, it's possible that we're going to hear something that we haven't thought about or the impact. And yeah, so that's that's where I feel like we're gonna hit some pushback. And maybe people will say, you know, this is all important and we want to cover it all. And if we wait another 10 years, that's gonna cost us that much more money, and Tony's giving me dirty looks. on it. So, students.
Yeah, I agree. I completely agree with like making sure that it's like a need versus just like, oh, like this seems great, you know? And I really appreciate like you guys taking the time to like really put thought into like the HVAC thing. Like that is just like the number one glaring thing that I've heard. So thank you for that. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I really appreciate that like idea of like really getting a lot of voice in this, since I see like a lot of different people really gravitating towards different things and there being different levels of impact on different people. You know, there's a lot of people who like want a specific thing, but some of the impact can be greater. So really, a lot of those discussions I think is good.
So one other comment I wanted to make was, I think that with the HVAC range, you know, we're getting advice from, or recommendation from our local expert that tier one is not even viable. My suggestion is, and especially since the cost range in the grand scheme of things is not huge to go from tier 1 to tier 2. My suggestion is make it easy and take it off the table and start with tier 2.
Yeah.
Since it's 13 million-ish, as opposed, I mean, if it's not gonna solve our problem, why are we presenting it as an option? Is kind of my thing.
Right.
That's your resident expert's opinion.
And if that's the resident
That's a loose
expert's opinion, it's gonna go to his head.
I know.
I
Thanks a
know.
lot.
He paid me beforehand. So, I just for simplicity, like if we can just say, like, here's what we need to do the HVAC to improve the system, and then here's what we need to do to add the AC or whatever it is.
That seems reasonable. That seems like a smart choice.
And the other variables that.
We're all trying to get on Tony's good side now. Yeah, that was
Yeah,
great.
exactly. The other thing that you'll get as a board, you know, the president, vice president, and I will sit and talk about other updates and what else you want to see between now and November. And we've already started talking about that as well, but you'll get to start seeing what these numbers mean when Piper Sandler starts providing us tax implications. And what does it look like, you know, with that bond that's going to expire in 29 and 30 from the first one, and then when could the next bond happen? And it's a reminder that, you know, none of these projects are, you know, they're all good ideas. It's, you know, how do we pace them out? And just because something isn't done now doesn't mean it's not done later. And that's where you're going to get to see, you know, by moving different variables, what does that do? And then what do you think ultimately that the community, and what do we think is the community can get behind? So those will be the other things that you're going to get. So it's, you know, it's multifaceted and allows you to have a really good discussion.
So we've got thumbs up consensus for moving forward on high school
Yes.
as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Little break, Deborah. Yeah, let's take 5. We'll start up at 5:45.
Like literally. I mean, like, it's, you know. I know.
but, I can speak this later. So you can understand what the process is. Yes, but pretty much is the name of this and the recommendation and review it or not, and why we agree or do not.
Okay, and we're just gonna talk about it, and we're not gonna.
No, it's, I think it's better.
Yeah, okay, we are on 3A, partial governance process monitoring, board policy 1806, budget financial planning, update on the financial dashboard, and June and July budget status reports. We're ready.
I'm gonna send this around to you. It is posted, but I know that it's been hard to read it at times on your screens, and so we printed you off some copies as well this time. So there are these. Sorry, Maggie Ty, we'll have yours for next time.
Oh my God.
I can share with her. I can see it.
I have two more.
I appreciate it anyway.
Look how big this is, Maggie time.
Thanks. I gotta squint really hard.
I still need my glasses.
So I'm gonna turn it right over to Kay and Jackie. They have been hard at work, and probably the hardest thing is yet to come, and that is trying to close out the year. It's hard to keep up with all of us in our spending and making sure that we spend out of the right accounts, and then everything has to be fixed. But appreciate all they're doing behind the scenes. So with that, why don't we go ahead and pull up the dashboard image to
There's a monthly, June and July, which one?
June, let's see, the monthly board financial report.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah, exactly, because we're gonna lose it. So I'll turn it over to you.
So before we start, I want to say, don't freak out about July, okay? We knew it was gonna be a bad June and July, just from our increased cost in special ed and our safety net that we're gonna be receiving in August. So if we look at it, we have had some very large special ed bills come in the last couple of months that were not planned, but we are gonna be recovering some of that money through safety net. So we're at the end of July, it says we're almost 1.5 in the negative. There was about 525,000 that did not get transferred into general, which I will take blame for because I was kind of busy doing math stuff and mine during that time. We got it done just a couple of days after the treasury deadline. We have almost 2.6 million coming in August for safety net, which is that extra funding we get when for special ed students. The one issue that happened this year is the state did make a change in the safety net threshold. Instead of 30,000, they raised it to 40,000. So we had to spend an additional 10,000 on a student before we got any extra funding. And we had 27 students on our safety net this year. So that's 270,000 more a district had to absorb before we could get additional funding on those students.
So just to make sure that I understand, so in the past, after 30, then we were compensated, but now it's 10 more
Yes.
per student.
Yes,
First.
And that's almost $300,000
yes. This year it was an additional 300,000.
with no notice.
And that's not like,
They did give us a warning, but I didn't know we were gonna have 27 students on safety. That was a big group.
And some of those larger bills that come in, we had, I'm just gonna use round figures because of confidentiality. We had over 10 students last year who were out of district, receiving services out of district. We'll have fewer than 10 this year receiving out of district services. And, that can be interpreted lots of ways. And there might be some that would say, that's fantastic. We have a district that's responsive and working hard to ensure that services that students can't receive or aren't receiving, they've received those. Others may look at that and say, well, it's because the district doesn't do a very good job and therefore you have to send kids away. And so, I hear both sides when I'm talking to community members. What I would say is, rather than looking at all the students together, we look at them one by one. And there's a story behind every one of those students. But if they're out of district, a lot of those costs come in towards the end as the bills come in, and we had more. And so we did have an increase in special education spending. And when you don't get safety net until after you've already spent the money, it's all, there's a huge investment that districts put together and to make that then when you don't get reimbursed till August, you've already, that money has sunk and then it booms back up.
And you don't get 100%. We get about 95%. So we applied for 2.72 million and we're getting 2.58. So we got about 95% of what we applied for, which is good, which is really, really good. They did an excellent job in special ed with the application. The application is one of the hardest things you have to do. We will not see a growth in our fund balance this year, partially because of the additional cost in special ed. Another reason is our utility bills, even though energy-wise, we are doing really well conserving energy. The increased cost in utilities was $294,000 this year from 22-23. We did budget more, but everything is just going up. What can we say? And the state is not keeping up with our utility cost. One other factor was the risk pool did give us a percentage last year of the increase. It ended up to be a little bit more, so we ended up with $67,000 more in insurance. So those are two areas that the state is really lacking on funding for school districts. I do believe we will hit 2.6, which will be about 3.4 to 3.5% for fund balance. I know we wanted to get to 5%, but just because of those additional costs, there's just no way we're going to make that. But we will be in the positive at the end of the year, just to let everybody know. I have no problem with that. If I thought it was going to be any different, I would tell you right up front.
And just to piggyback on that, information I'm getting, and I imagine maybe you've heard that MSOC is going to be well, I don't want to say legislative priority, but there's been a lot of interest. I think there's bills already being prepared where we'll work on. I've asked for numbers that we can provide to the legislature of our actual spend. And so, to me, and frankly to everyone that I've spoken to, those are basic education funds, and we should be getting them from the state dollar for dollar. So that's going to be that there was this aha last year, and now with the new budget cycle, hopefully we will see that.
We got $28 more students, but that only ended up to be like 56,000. That didn't even cover our insurance. I mean, it was kind of a joke when they said, "Oh, we give you 20." It started out like a couple hundred, and then it dwindled down to $28.
Yeah,
which helped a little, but not anywhere where
at least it didn't go down.
No. So
I think just a couple other things on that. When we hit, even if we stay exactly where we were in terms of fund balance, it's a reminder that we're still one of the few districts not spending into reserves right now. Obviously, we don't have any reserves to spend into, so that's part of that. But we're not, we don't have that deficit spending, so we are still having, conserving. And then we've already started planning to talk about, what does next year look like as we look to start continuing climbing out. But your legislative priorities that you really worked hard on in May and June, what it's demonstrating is you're right on target with it. Transportation, special education, MSOC, those are going to be huge priorities. And then thinking about the costs of employees and what might they do around some of the issues with experience factor. But the things you've put forward so far are playing out right before our eyes.
I have a question for you and one for you.
Okay.
It ties with the legislation. So the 10 extra that we're paying for special education, Is that applied to all school districts or that we have hit that?
No,
So
that's all
every single school in the state
Yeah.
are in the same position right now. Okay, so
Yeah.
that's good to know. Good and bad.
Yep.
I'm saying,
Yep.
I'm saying that it will be easier to advocate for what we want. Okay. So the question, when I see the graph, I know I have talked, with Matt this before, but, I noticed in July, the federal stimulus fund, the 8,000, and just, can you remind me?
There was a coding error. That's gonna be moved out.
Okay.
It was put under the wrong code and we caught it, but so we're gonna be adjusting it
Okay,
in August.
perfect.
It'll be gone in August.
Okay, I was
Yeah.
going to, I caught it.
It's one of those year-end things when we're balancing the book that we found when we were looking at this, and I said it was coded incorrectly,
Okay,
so we'll
yes,
be moving it.
perfect. I will just mark it as coded incorrectly. That's fine. I'm glad that I asked. Okay,
Any other questions on this? Concerns?
One other thing to remember, of why I'm not losing sleep over this at night, is just to reiterate, I think another point, remembering that, not only do we get the safety net back, but we'll get the 10% apportionment in August. So it's our largest apportionment of the year, that comes in August. So the state has their most amount of money in July and August. It's when districts have their least amount of money, but we get, that's why we'll see that bump. So, when you take into account, once we do all the fund transfers and we balance out everything, you take into account the 10% apportionment, 2.6 million coming in at safety net. That's why we're gonna be able to climb back and at least kind of hang in there.
Do we actually not have reserves? Like curious.
Well, right now, no, but, as we get the funding at the end of August, we will have it. They don't pay you safety net until August 31st, the last day of the month. Even though
Checks in the mail.
Yeah, checks in the mail. To me, that's one program I think that they really need to change and either pay us quarterly or monthly. I mean, it's not fair to keep districts, having to pay for all that without any reimbursement.
And the 10,000, that was OSPI just decided?
I think that was more of a federal, because safety net is ran by federal, even though it goes through state and federal funding. Do you know the state or federal? I can find out and let you know, Deborah. No
I'm
problem.
just wondering who to send the letter to.
I know.
I'm not kidding.
I think all districts are in uproar about it because
Right.
we're already underfunded so much for special ed. It's ridiculous.
It's a lot of money.
It is. Mhm. We only get about 50% of what we spend on special ed. That's about it.
Okay. Any other questions?
I think that with the explanation that you gave, everything else made sense because I was in a math
So I
problem
wanted to
early
say-
on and
That's
now.
why I said, don't freak out, okay?
I was the
Okay.
one freaking out earlier and I'm trying to understand, but now
Christina says, I'm having so much trouble with math for the meeting. I'm like, there's math for the meeting?
you know me, like I will go and but now, okay.
Thank you too for all your checking of numbers. We do appreciate it.
All right. Moving on. 3B, Board Policy 1008, Annual Agenda Planning, Annual Planning Calendar.
Jumping.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
perfect.
I have to, I'm talking a lot today. On the feedback for the August meeting that I was supposed to give you, that we noticed that the General Assembly handbook usually is published between, or the ones that, is between the 1st of July and the 15th of July, I made an average between, kind of the last 5 years. And the period for amendments usually lasts between the first 15 days of August and the last days. The General Assembly is almost always in the same time of the year. So I am guessing that it will be always like that. It will be the first maybe week or so, or we have a window for amendments. So, the meetings here in August did not align for us to have a discussion. And I don't know if we should just add like, in the other months that like in May that we have class, an extra meeting, like put maybe a plus, in August 5th. If we see that we need a meeting, then put it in, but if we do not plan to do any amendments, then leave it off and just, but have it there in the calendar, so we are aware that we might need to reconvene and meet to discuss this. So, does it make sense?
Yeah, something in
Early August.
early, the first week of August, we'll look at it is kind of a meeting that could be a special meeting.
Yes.
And it can have an asterisk that says, if needed, special meeting to discuss
Yeah,
legislative priorities with WASDA
yeah, that's.
or WASDA legislative.
Yeah, that's right.
We did have that today.
We have a July 31st.
Yeah, we had.
Yes, July 31st.
Yes.
Uh,
It wasn't August because it didn't fall on a Thursday.
Oh, that's why we selected July 31st.
Oh, yeah.
And
That's
and
why
it's
we
fine, I think
selected
that, that the period of amendment is for us to submit it, so if we discuss it ahead of time, that's totally fine. But if we do not plan or there's no need, we don't have to, unless you want everything that we might share. I think, I don't know, years might change, so I think it's wise to always have that in there for the future, just in case, we need.
So let's just note it as
So, yeah.
special meeting, so that it's not part of the.
It's not good air. So the discussion is a special meeting as needed, or then the lecturers will have to submit the amendment.
Right.
So the window for the amendment is for us to submit. So if we have the discussion early, just around that time, it's fine, because usually it's published between July 1st and July 15th. Unless it's published on July 30, and then we'll request to approve it, but that's it.
Yep.
So,
Okay.
Great. And thank you for this chronological calendar.
Yeah, very nice.
Very helpful.
It says 477. So you already have it labeled.
I know, yeah.
Okay. Any other concerns, questions?
I did, I don't know if you noticed on to move, the January meeting than the 27, I don't know if it's reflected here yet or not, no. It's on the agenda, Michelle wrote it.
It's on the right.
Yes, January the 27th is no school day for, it's a professional development day. So I was wondering if we could change our study session for the board to a different day, so we.
Makes sense. Unless our students want to come on that day.
Did you want to come on?
Without missing school.
You don't have to. July 27th, there's no school.
6 hours of.
Yeah.
Would you rather do that?
But also, I even thought about this, so I was thinking of
Any idea why was that just kind of picked?
We were trying, we typically have a study session the last week of July. And so we're trying to think of that. All right, January. Thank you. And so we were also working with, trying to think about bringing in, doing some board work with a consultant as well, but that can be changed as well. So we were trying to line up with some things, but we've given you other dates there that are very reasonable options that can still work. February 3rd, February 24th. And so if any of those work. Maggie Ty, did you have a hand up on it too?
Yes, I'm fine with moving that January study session if we need to. Sorry, my dogs are barking like fools in the background. But I wanted to say thank you so much for the chronological color-coded calendar. It's so much easier to use, like so much for everybody, I think. Thank you.
I would just say that February 3rd, is when the National School Board Association conference is in.
Is it?
Well, I read my calendar, but I might have that wrong.
I thought it was the end of
January.
January.
I coded it wrong. No, it's probably me. No, that's me.
It It was an earlier date and then it was updated. So
Okay.
the date that I have was the most updated one that I found.
It is February 2nd through 4th.
Probably because of the inauguration.
Probably because, I'm sure, maybe.
Yeah. Makes sense.
So just as a potential new meeting date, either Christina or I or both would be gone.
Yeah, that's probably not a good day then.
How about the 24th of February?
I have, yes, the 24th and the 3rd are open for me, so. Yeah.
The 24th is totally fine for me.
Yeah. That's a Friday, right?
Monday.
I need to look at the calendar, Jesus. Okay, yeah. That's fine for me. Yeah, sorry.
Yes, the 24th.
And then, just to bring your attention to the agenda again, I had also raised February 13th as a conflict for me personally. If other people could do it on the 12th, that would be great. Otherwise I can just, I potentially not come.
My only concern is, I'm not concerned about you missing a meeting, for a family obligation, at all. And that being said, my only concern is people kind of like, there's, other school events, and without knowing if that's then gonna conflict with something else.
I have a conflict with the start time if we move it to the Wednesday because my like big long day of graduate school classes ends at 5:30 on Wednesdays. So by the time I get back to Mercer Island, be like 6:15 or 6:30. So I could just be late if the alternative is to not have another board member there at all.
Will we have the district calendar yet? I mean, I know there's a lot
And
going on.
that's me for the whole year, for the whole school year is Wednesdays. I'm not free until 5:30 and then I have to get back to Mercer Island at rush hour.
So we're looking at February 21. Well, I'm seeing.
I tell you, just do it Valentine's Day.
Band, musical performances during the day, late grade musical performance. It doesn't appear to be, there's an Aberdeen joint group rehearsal. It doesn't look like any major performances or anything in the evening.
Right, because that Aberdeen concert's Thursday as well.
Oh, the Wednesday's rehearsal and that's the concert.
Yeah, but that's not even my conflict. Yeah. Okay, I'm double conflicted.
So that would work.
I am neutral there, so that means that whatever. If it works.
Maggie, what time did you say you wanted to start on Wednesday?
Like 6:30.
Could we just do performance stuff from the
Or
beginning?
actually, that's dumb. I could do what Tam used to do. Like you could start it at 6 and I could phone in on my way home and then like just drive straight to the meeting and switch to in person. Does that make sense?
Which is a perfect transition to just mentioning that a lot of the days I'm gonna be conflicted in time, just like early, but I know that. So just to plan that, and I was thinking the same thing. I was going home at 5 and then commute with you, and it's fine. I will be listening. And
So the three notations I hear in kind of chronological order would be the meeting on February 13th would be to move to February 12th. With like a 6 o'clock start time instead of our 5. Then on February 24th, that's when we'd have the study session instead of that January date. And then we're going to note that the July 31st is a hold for a special session.
July 31st?
yes, July 31st.
It was.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
the other way.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
2025. Yeah. So, and, I don't know, it's fine. We're good. Sounds good.
Okay,
Yes.
so this one takes action, needs action.
It does need action today. So I need a motion to approve board policy 1008 with the proposed changes.
So moved.
Second it? Any further discussion? In favor indicate by saying aye. Student? Aye. And board? Aye. Any opposed? So that's 1040. Next up, we have post-monitoring language review, board policy 1800 OE10 instructional program.
At the last meeting, I verbally gave you sample language, which you thought sounded reasonable. And so we went back and just put it into writing so that you see, and then the change that would go into effect is that items 2 and 9, which are the two changed ones, would be the level 2 reports coming to you when we monitor OE10 in May. And this also requires action.
Any questions?
No.
Comments? Motion?
Motion to approve. Second.
Motion is to approve board policy 1800 OE10, the new language modifying section 2 and 9, as well as the level of report for monitoring. If you all in favor indicate by saying aye. Student? Aye. And board? Aye. Aye. Any opposed? That's 1040. Thank you so much. Moving on to D, board policy 1003, board job description, board discussion on naming of district facilities policy.
So I took your direction from the last meeting and developed a draft committee proposal for you. The more detailed aspect of it are who I thought would be representatives who would round out a very comprehensive team. And then the timeline would be, if this was the direction we're headed, to be able to get everyone and recruit people, by the time we did that, it would be October before the first meetings would happen, and then come back somewhere in March, or later, we would update you with any updates that we make along the way. So this is open for any sort of changes or whatnot. The other option you had was 2 of you as board members could go, come up with a plan and then bring that forward. That was also positive. But this was the direction I took to create a possible framework.
I think this is a great start. My concern is the limited community involvement. Looking at this without a specific request in mind, I'm concerned that one community liaison and one alumni representative is not nearly the community input that we're going to need. I just want to make sure that, and I think it could be done in a number of ways, but I was thinking several of each, especially with both. The community liaison, they could be one and the same if it's a community member who is also an alum. So maybe like 3 or 4 of the people that hold the dual, and then 1, maybe 2 community liaisons who are not alum, and then alumni representative, maybe different length of time, a more recent alum, and then like a much longer veteran alum, who isn't necessarily is no longer a Mercer Island resident. So I just think we need, I think this is a great, area of encompassing. And then we also got a letter from the, Mercer Island.
Historical.
Thank you. I wanted to say heritage. I'm like, it's not heritage. Historical Society. So, you know, being able to, bring people in, like, well, I mean, I guess that's something the committee could talk about if they want to be able to bring community members in on specific requests. But, you know, that's something that can be discussed. It doesn't necessarily need to be part of that, but I thought that I appreciated their letter and interest in this as well, and thought that they would have a good perspective, even when at this point in time.
I wanted
One more is we have a lot of former teachers, administrators who are around and involved in the community. So I don't know that we necessarily need to call that out specifically, but we have, you know, former superintendents and former principals and who are active in the community, and that historical perspective, I think also would be a great addition. I'm not looking to have a 30-person committee, I guess that, but I think those are voices that we need.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I love the idea of having one or two of the former former teachers or principals or superintendents who are in our community involved. And I had in my head thought of having like an 8th grader on the committee. I don't know whether you think that's appropriate or not appropriate, but if we're going to have like someone from each level of the classes at the high school, I do think that the older middle school kids have really shown that they have the maturity to be part of these kinds of discussions, like in their involvement on the superintendent's equity advisory committee. And I would love to hear from that age group as well.
And then also like in terms of like how people will be selected to be on this committee, will that be worked out after like this policy, like this specific document is passed?
Yes, if this is the direction, the way that I'm kind of seeing it is, I would imagine the board, you as a board, you're going to decide who the 2 reps are. I know you've kind of loosely talked about that at the last one. I'll get a firm direction there. And then I'll work with those 2 individuals really on the selection process is what I thought. So that, you know, we'll put it out for a survey, we'll have people nominate, we'll collect it however we can, and then take into account, you know, I like the idea of, you know, recent graduates, you know, graduates who have been out for, you know, that 10 to 20 years. And then we have, you know, others who have graduated 20 plus years, and trying to balance all of that out. We'll add 8th grade. So, yeah.
I just want to clarify that this is a committee to develop a policy for naming. We're not making anything, we're just making sure that we're not, so it is so for the future, and that doesn't guarantee or not naming some building or something. It's just the first step towards that. So just wanted to make sure that this is the first step to move forward in that direction.
Yes, development of a policy.
Yes, development of policy. Yes.
So the first thing would be, is this how you want to move forward, or do you want to move forward with your idea of having just 2 board members create policy? I'm hearing you would rather have the committee.
I think so.
Exactly.
Yes.
And then you can, why don't we put on the agenda for your next meeting in September? I'll rework this and start doing some things in the background, getting surveys and things that we already have lots of examples of these that we have. And then at the next meeting, you can select which 2 of you are going to serve on this, and then we can start the work.
It is. I was going to ask what kind of interest there was.
Oh, I have another question about logistics of this process.
Oh, I mean,
I thought that we had talked about maybe having you come up with some sort of idea of how much staff time this process is going to take. It sounds like a lot already, and I'd be interested to know if, like, even going forward with this naming policy, the staff hour burden that it would be placing on the district.
I have to admit, I did not do the analysis of time. And
I
you
could
did
be
mention
making
that
my own
last time and I forgot.
I thought we talked about that.
It was mentioned and
Yeah.
I know you talked about it, but,
Yeah, I mean, I don't feel strongly about it. I just also do not want us to spend hundreds of hours of staff time on doing policy.
I'm envisioning, as I envision this, I envision a lot of work being done by committee members in between meetings, and that the meetings are more about, you know, updates and different things, and that doesn't mean staff has to be doing that. You know, I purposely kind of left some of these blank in terms of who would be the secretary, who's going to be the co-chairs, because we'll think about that along the way. You know, I certainly feel like what I'm envisioning is definitely doable. But I will do some better thinking about that as well. September 11th.
Is there, I wanted to know what interest from board members there was in participating.
So I know that Dan said that he would prioritize raising her hand, and if Dan does not, I would be willing to step in and split her. That's not true. So either one of us three, I guess, could be part of the committee.
Okay. Sure, you don't have an interest in it. And then
Are we thinking 2 board members going on this committee or just 1?
I don't think it matters.
It's up to you. You talked about 2 last time, but you could do 1 as well.
Didn't you talk about 2 because you need 2 to be the committee? I mean,
Well,
Yeah,
that's
2 because
ourselves, so like, we're not gonna.
but I'm not, but I mean, when I say I don't think it matters, like if there's 2 people that want to do it, I think that, I don't think there's any reason not to.
I saw some of I did my research on looking at the different policies around the district nearby. I think it will be better if we are 2, so we are aligned on how we're moving forward. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
I think it will be better. That's what I think, that the two board members will be perfect.
Okay.
2 board members in the committee.
Wait, no, I get it. I don't really understand your reasoning because board members don't necessarily fall on the same side of an issue, but I might just not be understanding. But I don't have any issue with 2. 1 or 2, I think is fine.
2 will be a good, and might be better to divide the workload too, so that's good. Yes. Good.
The only clarification that I want to make sure that I'm not kind of crossing over on is you do have 1006, which is a board committee. Are you considering this a board committee or is this a superintendent committee with 2 board members on it?
this is a superintendent committee with 2 board members on it. This is not a board committee of 2.
Well, no, a board, the
Right.
board can have a committee with additional members that means the board is responsible for running.
Right. Sorry. This is, but I'm thinking of this as a superintendent
You
committee.
take the brunt of the work, frankly, from admin. As superintendent's committee would be where superintendent is doing much of the coordination.
And I'm fine. I just want to make sure we follow your policy. I'm fine. It would likely, the structure that I've kind of built there is if it's a superintendent committee, it's likely one of the board members is the co-chair with me so that we're sharing that responsibility. And then you're helping to select committee members. It's the difference between a collaborative piece where I'm part of it, or am I just there watching and being part, similar to your long range facility plan committees, when we provide information, but it's really you who would facilitate it as the 2 board members, because we wouldn't have an outside facilitator unless that's a direction you went.
I'm happy to do that if the board's okay with that.
so I'm so confused now.
I think Maggie, you'd co-chair with me,
Yeah, I would.
So that would make it a what?
a superintendent committee.
I think that sounds good.
Okay.
And I think that like, I'd have no problem, I mean, I'm not going to be on it, so, but looking at the numbers, like to add those alum and additional community, I mean, I think a number of around 20 is certainly manageable. Is that?
Yeah, because we're gonna get people who can or can't attend different meetings and,
Right.
that always happens. So, we'll set that up and create that. And of course, all of the work, in addition to what you said, Director Martinez, not only is it just a policy committee, it's also a recommendation to you as a 5-member board. It is not a decision-making committee.
Yes.
Great. Okay. Board policy 1800 OE9, communication support to the board. Board's recommended policy revisions to board policy 3231, student records. This is the first reading.
Kind of a small change on this. I don't know, Aaron, if you want to take this, in terms of what we had to do. A big piece around student records is, there's been a lot of inconsistencies across the state in terms of whether or not you can withhold a diploma, because of fees and different things. And then there was some updates, I believe, with some legislative stuff. And Michelle, I looked at you as well, you and Aaron. But that's really the most of it. Which one of you wants to take it?
Yeah, that's essentially the primary impetus for this. It's not up there for me to look at, but is that it's updating our policy to ensure that we're aligned with changes in the law, which says essentially we can't withhold student records because they have a fee or fine upon graduation. So it just limits that.
Any questions?
You can, we put it on as a first reading, which is what we typically do. If you're comfortable and you want to pass it tonight, you can. Otherwise, we can put it on consent if there aren't other questions or recommendations for changes.
So making sure that there's a lot of things tonight. So this is to be compliant with the state, with everything that needs to be with us, right?
Yeah, so essentially, yeah, exactly. It's removing that. It used to say a diploma may not be released until students made restitution for damages assessed as a result of losing or damaging school materials or equipment. So essentially you have a fine in your account. When we used to be able to withhold a diploma, now we can't do that. So I guess we did make some other updates, just like linking and writing the names of the various RCWs, like legal references, just as we touch a policy, we've been trying to have the correct legal references, but that's the only substantive change, is just aligning it with the law, which says we don't withhold people's diplomas. It's one sentence strike.
Did the law change or?
Yeah, it was updated. Yes, so it was updated and made clear in the July publication of Policy Legal News, just remind to say this is what we.
Is that a big change?
The big issue is when students transfer, and they used to be able to withhold transcripts if they didn't pay their fees, but obviously that's not good for kids. So they changed the law.
Yes, it's not.
So it's just bringing us into compliance.
Yep.
So can we just approve this tonight?
If someone wants to make a motion.
I make a motion to approve it tonight.
So move. Maggie, second.
All right, so.
All right, Maggie, good job.
Board policy 3231 as proposed. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Student? Aye. And board?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? 1040. And we have, I believe, no public input unless that's changed. Next up, superintendent report.
Great, thank you. Several items to kind of bring to your attention. Want to first just make a couple of comments. First off, Our custodians, our maintenance and operations teams, just did an incredible job this summer getting our buildings ready. We had one of the new executive directors for WASA, who used to be your School Directors Association executive director. He came and did some work with our leadership team in August. And as a former superintendent walking through the high school, he took special time to commend Tony and the team for how well the floors look in the building. So really great job, and then orchestrating the carpets and the other changes. So you'll get all the updates on our capital projects later in September, but I did want to just call them out. Also, special thanks to our leadership team, principals, directors, executive directors, coordinators, and so forth. It's been a great start to the school year, and there's so much that goes into that in July and August to make that happen. So really appreciate all their work. Monday, a reminder, is Labor Day, day to honor the hard work of Americans past and present and their contributions to the country. And then it's always the cultural symbol of the unofficial end of summer. So it's one of the best months around here, if you ask me. So September we have coming. We also have Suicide Prevention Month, which happens in June. But we also, this week, and I appreciated some former PTA leaders who did a lot of work around gun violence prevention. This is the Secure Gun Storage Week. And so there's a national movement around being smart with our guns, and that's going on this week. And I'll put that into my September announcement or my letter, just reminding people there. The city does some things with gun storage as well along those. A couple of, I think, more pertinent items to make sure that we share. I'm going to kick it over to Ian, and he's going to talk a little bit about the superintendent communications plan and the plan that we edited and revised this year. And as we talk about that, I also want to thank Aaron and Ian, as well as everyone who helped on the calendar bargaining teams, because the 2025, 2026, and 2026, 2027 calendars are published on the website. So families can start making. They're not published yet. It'll be published shortly. Great. They've been finalized. The dates have been finalized. And so we'll be able to publish those so families can make plans ahead of time. And with that, Ian.
Yeah, thank you. We've updated a communications plan for 24-25. There's several items I'd like to just call your attention to that are a little bit new in the plan. Some of the stuff that is in the plan has been in there before, like regards to video or regards to niche. One of the things we're going to do this year is I want to get more student photos, educational photos, in classroom photos. And so we're partnering with a photographer to go in early September and get photos at all the schools of students in educational settings that we can use on all our platforms, that we can use in presentations on our website and social media. Some examples just of how these could be used is Nova Williams recently came to me and told me about a reading program that she's working on with some elementary leaders, and we want to promote that. Well, we want photos of students reading to put on our website, to put in social media, to put in flyers, to put in presentations. And it's other things like if Superintendent Arnold does a realtors community meeting, we need photos in his presentation of students. We're an educational institution. We need to show that we're educating. So I want to set up a program that hopefully every year we're in schools at the beginning of the year and getting photos that we can have built an archive. So that's in the plan this year. And those photos also, we can share them with teachers, with principals, with the schools, with the PTAs, and with the foundation. And the hope is, like, sharing them with the foundation, they can use them in their marketing materials. And if community members see a kid they know, somebody from the foundation, hopefully that spurs them to pay attention and maybe develop more of a relationship with that PTA or with the foundation. So that's one of the things in the plan. Last year, there's a reporter, a freelance reporter who did a story on the esports team at the middle school. That was a really good story, really in depth. This reporter took a really unique look at it, and I thought it highlighted a exciting group at the middle school. I talked to this reporter, and we're going to set up a situation where she'll be writing 8 stories on our district that are in depth like that. Esports story, 1 for each school, including Crest, 1 on the district. That is a lot more in depth than something I might write that is like 3 or 4 sentences, but it's also an opportunity to use someone who can speak to our excellence with just a different voice. We have lots of posts on social media. We have lots of video. We've done lots of stuff in the last couple of years. Well, let's add a new voice that speaks to things that we do that can look at things a little bit differently and provide something interesting or a new angle on something that one of our schools does, a student does, or a program. So when I say 6 schools, Crest, and us, it's a matter of connecting with the teachers, with the administrators at each school to say, what is something unique that you have going on that we can celebrate? Is there a group? Is there a student? Is there a staff member? Is there a program? Is there an initiative that we can, hey, this is really cool. We want to really get in depth with a written piece that might then also include photos, that might also include video that we could share on our platforms and then share within our community. Those stories, in getting those and finding out what those are is meeting with the administrators and meeting with the teachers. Well, the last couple of years I've been in middle school and been in the high school in their weekly meetings, and I want to do that at the elementary level now too, where the administrators meet to weekly or twice a month to get with them and hear what's going on, to find out what these stories can be. But also there's going to be stories that they suggest that just don't work, that for this specific reporter to write on. That doesn't mean we can't do a story on it. That doesn't mean it can't be something smaller, or it can't be a quick video, or it can't be just a couple photos. So the meetings with the school leaders is twofold in that, hey, let's find some stories that we can really get in depth on. But let's also create a process where in the elementaries, where I'm there more often, finding out other things that are happening that can be smaller stories. So that's one of the things I wanted to call your attention to. And then the last 2 things I wanted to just bring your attention in that is community engagement. One, we're going to host a couple of MIPA nights at schools this year, and this will be an opportunity to get in front of preschool families before they make the decision on what kindergarten they're going to send their student to. And it's an opportunity to engage with them prior to them making a decision and get our materials and get our brand in front of them and start a relationship and start a way to see why choosing Mercer Island School District is the best option for their students' educational journey. And then, and also connected to MIPA is at the circus last year, I met a parent who had students at a private school on the island. And we got to talking and about what it was that Mercer Island could offer them that would make them change their mind and leave that private school with their 3 kids and coming to Mercer Island School District. And that discussion led me to talk to Fred, and it led me to talk to some other people within the district. But is there something that we can do or provide for this family's request? Because they also had other private school families at the school that were interested in some things that we could provide. And so we had a meeting with these families. We're we put together a survey to send to these families to say, tell us a little bit more about what you're looking for. And that's going to go out at the beginning of September. And hopefully it leads to some students possibly enrolling down the road as we find out what we can provide. But it's an example of taking every opportunity we can to connect with a family, because any family on the island that doesn't go to Mercer Island School District, that has a student at a private school or off island, they're a potential enrollee. So we have to but look to make sure we're doing everything we can to find every kid that's not in that Mercer Island school that lives on island that is in our district. So just trying to be more cognizant of those opportunities and finding ways to create those opportunities and follow through on those opportunities. So those are just some of the things I wanted to point out. And then another one that's not part of the report, but the Fox 13, Seattle is going to do marching band segments on their Fox NFL broadcasts starting this year. They have 2 minutes of local time that they can do a newscast, and the Fox does not want to do news during a football game because they don't think their viewers that are watching football are interested in finding out about the weather or what's going on in news, because they can find about that on social media or anywhere else. So they reached out and said, hey, we want to do this marching band segment with your marching band. We're Charlotte High School Marching Band. Be interested in being highlighted for 2 minutes during the Fox NFL broadcast on September 8th. And I said, yes, because yes. And so our marching band is going to have a 2-minute segment on Fox on September 8th, the opening day of the football season. And they're putting together a program. They're going to have a whole video thing. They're probably Michael Ketchum, the video production teacher. And it'll be, what I understand, pretty cool. And they asked me to reach out to other school districts, which I did for them. But they also have the Super Bowl. And so when they called me, I was like, well, how do we get the Super Bowl segment? Because we want to be there. So that's something that's just coming up. And then the Waterloo Marching Band, I don't know if the board knows about this. They're going to come out and film that as well too, to use in their college football broadcasts, like a bumper type thing, or possibly down the road in the season. So those are just 2 little things coming up that I didn't know if you knew about. So I hadn't put them in the board report yet because they just came up.
Any questions? I've got a few more things. Anything on the comms plan or anything that you want to give feedback on? Or this was something that the board, when I was hired, was part of my first contract, and I continued to just do with Ian because it has provided some tremendous direction for us and keeps us focused on proactively communicating and telling our story.
Also that I love the idea of serving the perspective, the families that live in the Merced Island, but not only as a way to attract others, but also as a way to grow as a district, to see what we need to grow or what we are not looking at. So just a way to see ourselves in the.
Yeah, and I just want to say thank you for taking like the photos of like the kids. Like I know the seniors, like they were like, I heard that some people were like crying because of how cute the kindergartners were, like walking into school on the first day. Like they saw the post on Instagram. So yeah, those are really good.
So you know, students do save their images and they share it the way they use them. So
Yeah, I just wanted to say you guys are killing it. I'm always so happy to see what we have on social media. It's night and day from what we started out with when I joined the board in 2019. And I just think the district as a whole has really like moved forward with the sophistication of its communication and the amount of thought that has gone into kind of like squeezing every bit of juice out of the communication orange. So thank you for that.
That's right.
Yes.
You know, my statistics teachers over the year would tell me to be careful about correlations and causation. So we don't know if it's turning into new enrollment, but it's a good segue into new enrollment and just some highlights. We enrolled, so last year's kindergarten class on average by the end of the year was 187 students in that class. When they rolled up to first grade, we got the bump that we usually do, and we're at 216 first graders now in that class. And even better news than that, this year's kindergarten class is 216.
Nice.
So the kindergartners coming in already equal what our first graders are this year. If we get another bump like we typically do, we'll start heading into that 230 range of our students. So that's some great news in the elementaries. The other great news in the elementary is that it appears that we are gaining more students than we're losing. So we're going to be, even though that fifth grade class was large, we're going to hit our number easily, if not outpace it for our budget. Middle school, we had 75 new students join Islander Middle School this year, and only 37 who withdrew. And so we've got a great group coming in. And I'll get to the open enrollment and the impact of that here in a second. But I also then wanted to highlight the high school who saw over 90 new students enroll this year. And so in looking through the open enrollment lens, we had 45 students who enrolled through open enrollment. 13 of those were 8th graders, and the rest were all 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th. The split, as I kind of shared before, pretty even between the east side of the island and the west side across the bridge. But we had very strong numbers there. So, you know, I believe we're going to outpace our budgeted number, which is what we always want to do. And so I think we're looking really good in terms of our enrollment this year.
Would this be
Yep.
inappropriate? I wanted to ask, I know Ava and Lucy did a little event with new students.
Yes,
Oh,
here's their flyer. Why don't you guys talk about your new student event that you planned?
We were gonna talk about it later too, but we'll talk about it now. James, sorry. Basically, yeah, we had a combination of different activities. It was the day before school, 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. And we started out with this thing called human bingo, where like it's like a sheet of paper and it's like, oh, like have someone that like has a sibling sign the paper. So it's a chance for people to like walk around and kind of meet each other. And we also did like a big circle of icebreakers where you say your name, grade, and other things. And then Lucy, do you want to talk more about what we did?
Yeah, then we did some like kind of like a trivia thing where we had different questions about like the high school. It's like an opportunity for them to be kind of competitive. We put them in groups and then they were like answering trivia questions about the high school. So I think some people learned stuff, you know, like where the buses are and all that sort of stuff.
And like what's our mascot, like what, you know, like basic things that every student should know.
Yeah. And then we went into like, we had some like Q&A and like offered some tours around the high school. A lot of people are already taking tours, but a few people had, so it was a good opportunity for them.
Yeah, and it was fun because like for the trivia, if you won, like you got a maroon bandana or like the maroon lipstick for eye black. So now they're stocked for spirit wear too. But yeah, I think it went well. And that was like in addition to like the new student tours that the counseling center ran the Friday previous to that. So like it was good for like new students to come now, like after having gone through the school, talking to their counselors, now they get to connect with like their fellow students. That was like a good part.
Yeah, and it was very well attended too. We had like 35 or so new students.
Yeah.
So it was a good opportunity for people to meet people. Like they can meet people that are great to like talk to for the next day at school.
Yeah.
Keep going on your updates. What else do you want to share? I know you don't have an official update, but anything else you want to share about the start of school?
Yeah, well, we did attend the NSBMA conference. That was like 2 weeks ago. So that stands for National Student Board Member Association. I think it's like a separate thing from like the National Board Member Association. And it was like a Zoom conference. It was like 3 days, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Saturday and Sunday was like 6 hours. And then Friday was 2 hours, which is a lot of time on Zoom. But yeah, it was like a combination of like sessions where like they give basic info about board meetings and then like mock board meetings. And then what else?
We also did, we worked a lot in like small groups and we developed like a policy proposal. So we each had different areas that we worked on to like develop a policy proposal for that. I think I was on like college readiness.
And then my group was on equity of opportunity and like we developed like a peer mentorship type proposal that like people are meant to take back to their schools, which I think it's best to approach through SSA for our school personally. But yeah, I think overall the conference was really, I feel like a lot of this general information that they gave was like, as a second year student now, student board member, I feel like a lot of it was self-explanatory for me. And I feel like when I came in, you guys did a really good job with like onboarding already. So I feel like I already knew a lot of this stuff. And I think for some districts, this does replace the onboarding. But I think the good thing about it is that like having the students focus on proposals, it really gets them thinking about like, oh, what is the root issue? Like, because they made us go through like, oh, what is the root problem? You know, like how are you gonna address it from the very, you know, like the deepest part, you know? And yeah, and I think it would be useful for like new students. Lucy might have a different perspective because she hasn't had as much experience.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting. Like we did a really good job of onboarding with a lot of their more like lecture sessions. I did really know all the information already. But developing the policy proposals is definitely like a great way to start thinking about these kinds of issues and stuff. So it's harder to have that experience. So it was great to do that. And it was also very interesting to like work with other student board members across the country and learn about like the differences in their district. Having a much larger district is super different. So it was very, very interesting to learn about that.
So I think in the future, like, I don't know if like the senior board rep can do it, like should do it, like Lucy probably wouldn't need to do again. But I think like the incoming junior board rep could probably attend this conference. And I know they're doing in-person events in the future potentially, because this is their second year doing it, so.
Great.
Yeah. And then more, okay, about school, the phones. Yeah, do you want to start on that?
Yeah, I think the first day was definitely kind of rocky. There was really long lines to get the pouches during the day since a lot of people don't attend Fees and Photos days. So it was pretty difficult to get one. Like I spent most of my first period in line to get my pouch. But after that, like today, I think went pretty well. People had it in their pouches and stuff. Like I didn't really see many people with phones or anything. So I think it's actually going pretty well. And there wasn't long lines at unlocking stations and stuff.
Yeah, and I was like pretty surprised because, well, first of all, the teachers did a really good job like enforcing it. Like on the first day, they had each student like hold up their pouch like to see if it's locked and like there. And then like they explained like the different like consequences for having your phones out. That's pretty scary. Like there's a 90-minute reflection time apparently if you get your phone taken away. Do you guys know we can tell you? Yeah, so the first one is if you have your phone out and then the admin will come down, take your phone. You have to grab your phone at the end of the day from the front office and like talk with them. The second time is the same thing, except your parents have to pick up the phone. And then the third time is like, I think parents and you should do the reflection time at the end of the day.
Parents and the students do the reflection?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so.
Parents and students do the reflection?
Or actually I think it might just be the student one.
Parents pick up and the reflection, but the parents don't have to come to the reflection. Great idea.
And after that, the parents have to wash dishes in the kitchen.
But yeah, I think so far, even though students have been complaining about it, like it is what it is. A lot of them are just accepting that that's what it's going to be like. And then I also know like tardies and absences, they're also like cracking down on that. So it's similar consequences. It's except with like absences. So like one excused absence is like whatever, that there's those different tiers. And what other changes? Oh, parking. There's so many changes this year. They assigned parking spots and it worked pretty well yesterday. I know some people were upset for having like assigned parking in Northwood and Crest, but the first day was smooth. Today, I have to admit, it was already a little rocky because students already started like parking each other's spots. So, but I think in general, like so far, it's only been 2 days. I'm glad that like admin has been putting a lot of effort into this and like helping solve and put attention into the parking issue because a lot of students complain about that one.
How'd they assign it?
They just, on Fee and Photo Day, it's like first come, first serve. So you go there. Yeah, I think you like prepay or like pre-register before Fee and Photo Day. You go and then they'll give you like the pass. They first started out handing out admin passes, so like the ones near Crest right there. And then they went into C-Law, which is like interesting. They should start with Crest. C-Law. They should start with C-Law.
They didn't go from seniors to juniors?
Oh, yeah, seniors get part.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't think juniors even work it because.
Yeah, I don't think juniors got parking passes this year at least.
Right, they
because
sent
our
out an
class is
email
pretty
initially
busy.
saying, go ahead and try, and then they sent another email saying, don't bother.
Yeah. So, it was a first come, first serve. That is kind of what
That's kind of brutal.
determined. Yeah, that's what determined where your parking spot is. Yeah.
Do you know that ahead of time?
Well, no.
It's a good way to get people to come to Fee and Photo.
Yeah, that's true. A lot of people were like upset, like when they got there by like 11 a.m., which I think it runs to like way later. They were like, oh my gosh, like there's no parking left. Like I'm stuck with Northwood for the rest of the year. But so they didn't notify us previously. So that's anything else?
Write that down for next year, Lucy.
I'm gonna be here for the Independence Day. I was traveling. There's definitely a lot of people that are gonna miss that because they're on like vacation and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, and then like in terms of like onboarding for like the freshmen and welcoming them in, Linker has done a great job. Like they did the whole freshman orientation thing. And yeah, the freshmen are excited. My sister's a freshman, so she is really jittery about that, but yeah. I think that's it. Do you have anything else? I don't think so. Pretty smooth.
Quick reminder, sorry, go ahead. Was there anything else? Okay, quick reminder, board meeting is a Wednesday, our next board meeting. It's on the 11th, not the 12th, for this one. So it is on Wednesday. I'm gonna double check my dates. Do I have that right, Michelle?
That's it.
Yeah, okay.
Is it at 6 or 5 or 5?
That gets time when you start school or classes. Probably not.
I don't start classes till September 25th.
Okay.
Okay, so 5 o'clock on the 11th.
Yeah.
And thank you for coming out to the barbecue and helping to be part of that. I think we had a lot of thank yous there. And then lastly, and I won't read the whole thing, I think it's just testament to what our administrators do for students. And it's echoed with what I think our educators are doing across the district. But Mr. Wold got a message just a few weeks ago from a graduate who walked across the stage there in June, but was trying to get into a university in London. And he admits that he had some poor planning on his part and only had 48 hours to get his full application in. And this happened earlier in the spring. And he got a hold of Mr. Wold, and Mr. Wold did some work, I think, even on the weekend to make sure that everything went through. And he wrote him a really lovely thank you note and just let him know that he got into the college of his dreams, the Imperial College of London, which is into a computer science piece. And I appreciated, a graduate just writing back what he said, I'm going to miss MIHS and wish you and the school all the best of luck. And I think it's just testament to what our educators do for our students and go that extra mile. And then how responsible and respectful our students are to write back and thank those who made a difference. So with that, we're off to a great start in our new school year.
Thank you. Thank you.
You bet.
All right, board policy, or number 5A. Board policy 1008, annual agenda planning. This is a level 1 monitoring report of the policy that we just approved today. So I'm looking for a motion to find the board in compliance.
I'm good. Second.
Any discussion? Just as an explanation, this board policy 1008 is the annual agenda planning and requires that we schedule certain types of meetings, that we publish our calendar and approve it in August and every August, and that we attend to consent agendas items as expeditiously as possible. So with that, and hearing no other discussion, all in favor indicate by saying aye. Student?
Aye.
And board?
Aye.
Aye.
And so it's 1040. Board is in compliance with 1008. And next we have our consent agenda. Looking for a motion to approve.
Motion to approve. A second.
Any discussion? All in favor of the consent agenda as published, indicate by saying aye. Student?
Aye.
And board?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That's a 1040 as well. And superintendent announcement.
I covered it all in my report.
Alrighty. Legislative report.
Okay. So, Christine and I have been extremely busy going through the, can I have that? Yeah. Going through the proposed amendments and, the general handbook for the WASDA conference, which will be coming up in a few weeks down in Sea-Takish area. And Christina has been good enough. We worked together yesterday, most of the day, and then did a Zoom in with a bunch of East Side board directors to talk about sort of shared priorities and shared approaches to some of the amendments and just the General Assembly handbook. And Christina made a spreadsheet about it, which if you want to walk through it, or I don't know how, this is kind of, it's very long. I mean, as you can see, there's 100 pages of items. We have some that relate more to our personal legislative priorities. And most of them, there's some, and most there, the committee that made the handbook has suggested what we do with it. And a lot of, most of the areas we're in agreement with them, like they say, do not pass. And we also agree that this should not be passed. Do you want to talk about the areas that's particularly pertaining to us?
Yeah, and I will say, Michelle, I did inspire, you got inspired because my spreadsheet is super color code now. Wanda did share something that will guide us to see if we were going to agree with them, with their recommendation or not. But there's a few areas of concern that will limit the capacity of Wanda to do advocacy the way that it's written. So even if there's either no amendments or if there's amendment that was proposed, it is good to know where these areas are, because if nobody speaks for them, if the recommendation within all the school boards around is that it might be important for us to prepare and maybe speak to be against. And one example is the bylaws to pass the article number 2 that will limit the capacity. It will be what is I have to. Can you I can say the name and you will.
Okay, it's about it basically will say that WASDA will not advocate for any policy or any legislation that has an unfunded mandate. So
there's also a state, so
right.
They have to be, I think that it is meant that if the state proposes something, they will not advocate for it. So it has to come from a local perspective.
Right.
So it will totally dismantle the objective of WASDA. And there's a few here and there that will twitch the language that way. So it dismantles just the power of WASDA to advocate for our needs. So it's just to be aware where they are. So we are very conscious of how we're voting. And when we talk to other board members in the state, to make them aware of why it's a concern, not only for us as district, but also for other districts, how this will impact them. So I will share this with you, but there's a few on, there's one in the bylaws, which is the main one, which if that one passes, pretty much the rest of the meeting is fruitless, because then everybody's by their own, right?
Right.
So, but after that, I think that it is the association operations and it goes later on governance. I think those are the main areas that we will just have to be very aware of what is happening. So, then I know that there's the article that in the bylaws, the student portion of it, that we were going to that we supported. It has been amendment to I think that it was very lengthy. So now instead of all of that, it's going to go into the procedures of how it's going to be applied. And now it's just it is a very small paragraph related to the students. So it is consistent with the language of the bylaws, I will say. And I agree to that, but since you were the ones who did support, we wanted to ask if you were okay with the new language. But I think that she shared you with that to support the changes. So which just wanted to make sure, because we were a part of the process, so we didn't want to point that. So in terms of our priorities on Mercer Island, I think in the category 2, which is capital facilities and school construction, everything is in our priority. So we want to make sure that all of them passes. And there's a few in the funding and allocation category that also we identify as our priorities. So we'll share that color-coded document with you so you can follow. But we have identified which areas are the ones that we, so I think that the main thing is that there's a few areas of concerns that it's not on our priorities, but on the language of others that will impact either kind of the way that we operate as district and WestDOT, but also on our values. And one example was also on number 6, which is the WestDOT equity statement. They are they're changing the language, and it totally will eliminate the equity portion of being so there's a few.
It's a few where there,
A few there.
yes, they take out statements like that and put in like personal experience, and that stands for any kind of racial or economic diversity.
Or,
You know, it's an effort to remove any DEI mention from us thing and make it so that we can't advocate for that.
But I think it is concerning us that it's eliminating, for example, if it's special education or socioeconomic status, that is eliminated to special circumstance. And anybody can have a special circumstance. If you have broke issue, you have I don't know. So the language is very, but it is, you have to be aware that is, and the recommendation of most of them are do not pass. But yes, that we have to be present because the previous years, as we heard, is that a lot of people left the conference when this were going into voting. So to really stay at the until the end of voting, because it does matter. Voting matters. So, but we'll share the color coding so you know which ones are the ones that are of interest to us. So, and I know it's hard because I just finished it today, so it was very hard for me to share it with you.
Right.
It's very.
So basically what the work that we've been doing on this is we've gone through the document, made sure that we understand, you know, what we're voting on, what we're agreeing to, consulted with other East Side school districts to sort of see where we as a region, you know, feel are important and worked out some best ways to coordinate with our districts to east of the mountains where possible, or our smaller districts up north or whatever. And we've worked out, you know, our personal strategy for like what we're going to support, which for the most part coincides with the WSDA recommendations, although not completely. So I guess I don't really know what we need from you guys on this. I mean, basically just like do I have like, you know, if I have your like consent to vote the way that we're discussing and then, or follow any new developments that come across at the conference.
I will just compliment that. I think that we went in depth, but I think I have to debrief with myself which ones are concerning and not to be prepared. That if you need to talk, we can be ready to talk. But if we don't have it. Like if it's just easy to pass, it's fine. But if not, we have to be ready to stand up for what we want. So just I think that's identify those that are really
the ones that are priorities and that are top.
Yes, that really or that we
right. And there's like a number of amendments or issues that are like nearly identical that, you know, all sort of cover each other, but then there's some that are sort of sneaking in something different.
So you kind of have two asks is what I hear. One is based on the process you went through, is the board behind you in terms of making those decisions on the fly and being the representatives of the board? And the second one, which is usually asked, but doesn't have to be this time, because you already did all the work as a board to set your legislative platform, we're not, you know which legislative platforms match to that. And so I think you're asking for affirmation that the legislative platform still stands and that's what they want you to advocate for. Is I think where you kind of are landing.
Going into a legislative, session where you're voting on behalf of the board, it's an uneasy feeling, right? But we've had the discussions and I would say, go with what you believe that the board priorities are. If there's any that you're concerned that you aren't sure of what it is, then bring that to us at the next meeting before the General Assembly. And we can do kind of a consensus vote on it. We can't take action on it, but we can do a consensus. But I think for the most part, just I haven't looked at it like you guys have, but right. I did last year. But I mean, I think your gut is your gut is telling you the right thing. It's the same group that took away the weighted voting. And where we were all caught off guard last year. And then this is the whole prioritizing local control over everything else. It's like, but that's not the way education in the state of Washington works.
Right, and in some of these cases, some of these amendments are like against state law,
right, they are, but they still can pass. So, I think your gut, your instinct is correct and feel comfortable advocating for the positions that that we support.
And be reassured that like Christine and I have gone through, I was a fine tooth comb many times, but like with an eye of like, these are our legislative priorities, let's identify like where these are aligned and address and make sure that we are, voting in the way that supports our previously agreed upon legislative priorities to the board, but then also we looked, some of these go against like our values, vision and mission of the district and making sure that we're, supporting that personally for our districts and stuff. So I feel confident that we, as much as any two first-year school board directors going to this role could understand and support what we're doing. You can also later if we did.
Give yourselves more credit and be comfortable with the positions. And like I said, if there's a proposal that you're just like, that you just don't really know what to do with, bring that to us.
And through our coordination with the East Side School Board Directors, we're identifying, still working together to identify areas that might need more vocal support in the assembly. And if they do, I'll be prepared to speak.
Maybe talk. Yeah, just you guys sound like you're all over it and I trust you and everything that Deborah said applies. If there's something that you have a specific question about and you're not really sure about, feel free to come back to the whole board, but I trust you to act on behalf of the board based on the discussions we've had in the past. So thank you for your hard work going through all of that.
And really every year, at least since I've been on the board, I feel like when I came in, it felt like had very little action in the legislative realm and it really has just gotten stronger and stronger every year. So the fact that you guys are doing this and then bringing it back, beforehand to talk about is, I appreciate it and it really does make a difference. And
I would say that this change of having two for the future will be fantastic.
Yes.
Because there will always be somebody that knows how the process goes. And yes, so.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We'll see how it goes.
Bringing us.
Yes.
Centering us.
Yes, you're good. You've done a tremendous amount of work and it shows. Anything else? Announcements, inquiries, and reports.
Do go ahead.
Okay. I went to this is the 3 weeks since our last meeting. I went to the new teacher orientation and represented the board there. Very nice to see the bright shiny faces and very impressive swag bag for the new teachers. I was hearing some buzz about how happy they were about those, but they had a lovely, it looked like a lunchbox or a bag or something, but just filled with lovely items. It was really nice to see. I went to the Pride in the Park thing, as I know a couple other people did, which was small but mighty. it was actively raining that day, I think, but, people were very happy to be there and, that was nice. So, we zoomed into the PTA advocacy, their first meeting, which was basically to sort of set the role of the PTA advocacy board and we'll be splitting our time on that from now on. They don't need both of us by any stretch of the imagination. We had that lead drop. We've been coordinating with our lead drop counterparts in 30 school districts. And of course, we were serving food to staff members, teachers, educators, whoever wanted to eat, basically.
I will just be helpful with that. I will just say that Trident Park, you say it was small. I think it's not. I think it was, I saw the first one and I have been part of, and I think even if it's raining, there was a lot of people. It was a great partnership with the city and National Land Use and Private Services. And there's like a lot of community partners that were there. So I think that is something that it shows, and I do hope that students and families know that it is supported in the community and they feel safe to be part of this community. So that's a statement there. And I also met with the PTA that advocate for the PTA person that advocate for the gun safety and making sure that our youth are advocate for safety for our students, and so they want to see if eventually we can follow up on some of the things that they have asked, how we can work together, and so I will work with them and see how things. Just it was a kind of a community engagement portion, so it's will be more. That's it. I will just, well, I have one comment regarding the cell phones. I think it has been a great experience, but I know that in the middle school, some students said that the clip broke, but they are not sure if they should report it or not. I said, you should report it now because after it will cost you, but I know it might be very pleasant because it broke the first day, but just knowing that there's some issues there is, but I think it's going well.
Yeah, I think, well, I have heard of people at the high school like purposely bending the pins, but they still end up putting the phone in the house. So either way, if it's involved or not, I think it's still
working.
Yeah, it's still serving its
The
purpose.
policy, yes, exactly, that's right. But it's just letting you know that there's fix, and at the same time, I will say to you and all the community, this is a period and we will see how things go until December and we will be, I think that it's a curve. So let's see how it goes. But so far so good.
Yep.
Next time.
I don't have anything that other people haven't already commented on, so pass.
Yeah, I mean, only thing I have in addition, it was my first day of school without a student and, no, it's okay. We're adjusting. So my point is that it's really been an interesting, I'm excited about having a new perspective being on the board. So it's, you know, I mean, it's been what, 2 days and already feeling the different perspective without having that, you know, specific, and I've been around, but it feels very different. So, and I just think I'm not looking forward to having a different,
sure.
Yeah, it's just a different picture of what things are, and, you know, hearing just outrage about some issues. I'm like, I don't really have a dog in the fight, but I appreciate hearing about it. I mean, no, like, and I mean it sincerely, like, I want her perspectives, and it's really interesting to hear the perspectives without having a dog in the fight. So, I'm looking forward to it. I hope I can just improve my work.
This is my first time not having anyone at the elementary school level. So since my youngest just started middle school and the others are off in college, and that just leaves me wondering, do we actually have anyone who has an elementary student on the board? Kids both at the middle school already?
But this is I think it's a relatively new phenomenon that all 5 board members have kids in the schools, actively have kids in the schools. So I mean, I think over the past, it's been many more with, you know, grads or former educators. So I think this was more of a unique thing.
Yeah.
Director Brayman was a grandparent for a number of the years that she was in the board, but not a parent.
Right. And former educator.
And former educator. And then Director D'Souza, towards the end of his term, similar to you, his kids had graduated out. And so, yeah, I think it ebbs and flows. And yep, we have middle school and high school represented by you all right now.
Yeah, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. I'm just saying it means we have to make a little extra effort to kind of pay attention to what's happening at the elementary school level, because it's not like right in our face in our own homes, you know, and so it makes the student reports, like the student board members reports, even more important, like that connection and kind of updates on what is actually happening in the elementary schools.
Yeah. And I mentioned to Fred, and I can talk to Ian about it too. And, but I'd be curious to know, I don't think we need to have a huge public discussion about it, but finding a way, you know, I know different board members have tried to do like office hours before, and, you know, it's pretty low attendance. And so people kind of give it up because it's just a waste of time if no one comes. To give community members an opportunity to have dialogue with either with board members, or not necessarily the board as a whole, but with one or two board members, because of the Open Public Meetings Act, we can't do it as a group. But finding ways to do that, to be at, you know, different school events where like bingo nights, or, you know, back curriculum nights, things like that, where there is access to a board director. And that parents are told that there's access to a board director if there's any questions or concerns. That I don't know if that's something that people would be interested or use as a resource, but, you know, just I'd be interested at some point in hearing what people think if we want to push out there, that, you know, and maybe even as we, you know, are representative on the PAC, like if we said, you know, once a quarter, if you're on the Lake Ridge PAC, you're going to go once a quarter to an event at the school, or even, you know, once a semester.
Great idea. Yeah.
Go to an evening event where there's parents, or go to a PTA meeting or something. Just, is there another way that we can make ourselves more accessible to have a conversation? Which I don't disagree that public input is kind of a frustrating avenue for that conversation. So just, you know, think about it. If anyone really wants to do something or tackle it or make it part of the communication plan, you know, we can always add it onto an agenda and talk about.
Yeah, just throwing it out there. I would say that with the PTA group that I met, that was one of the things that they highlighted. How are we building community or having feedback? And I did mention that during campaign, I had a lot of feedback, but after I had to seek out, there's not that much feedback, and I didn't know how to bridge that gap. Because the conversations is where things I can kind of, I'm okay with listening and how to make sure that people understand that we're available, and that's why we're here. So to maybe go to the New Families event or something that there's a table for the board that two of us could see, or maybe different things. But that was something that they did say, that we were alienated in a way, and we need to bridge that gap in the community. So I think that we need to find creative ideas on this. So yeah.
All right, we'll keep having the conversation. Yeah. Well, next month we will do our assignments for the schools and committees. So maybe we'll just kind of add this as part of the agenda item. See if we want to expand, maybe to say attend an event once a semester or something for the school that you're assigned to. That's a way to start. We can talk about. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. We have an executive session. Purpose is to to discuss litigation or potential litigation pursuant to RCW 4230-1101I. So we're going to recess into executive session. It is 7:27. We do come back, but I expect that our students will no longer be with us since they will not be at the executive session. So thank you guys both for attending. We're looking into swearing you in with at our next meeting. We will be in executive session 20 minutes till 7:50. And I need a motion and a second to recess into executive session.
I second.
All in favor? Student?
Aye.
And board?
Aye.
Aye.
So that's 1040. And it is 7:28 and we are in recess and we'll return at 7:50.